this is the best second screenwriting book that somebody could read. I was really impressed by this. It was delightful. It's basically 700 episodes of Script Notes, the podcasts that they've been going on for years, kind of condensed like the best takeaways and thoughts organized in chapter form, subject by subject, all like the really important things that you need to know about screenwriting, especially at the beginning of your journey. I mean, what do you think, Alexie? I loved it.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. It's so, the podcast itself has like 700 episodes, right? And then they made the book so that you don't have to listen to all 700 episodes. And then we read the book so you don't have to read the book. So now it's like...
This is really an act of concision.
Yeah,
this is
really
lazy as heck.
Which is what screenwriters need,
We are lazy, and we need a lazy delivery of content. I personally love this book. It reminded me, it's funny, like I know I've heard all these concepts. It's not like there's anything here that was earth-shatteringly new for me, but like some things were just so well stated. I was like, wow,
yeah.
I really wish that this was how I was introduced to this concept. And there were some reminders of like, oh yeah, that's such a smart way of thinking about this. That's if I was to explain this, if I was explaining plot holes to somebody or like causality, this is such a better way to get into it. We're going to save the second half of the book for another discussion in 2 weeks, but we're going to take the first 9 chapters. And we're just going to go chapter by chapter, keep it as a live conversation, talk about the things that are big takeaways. On screen here, I have my notes that I wrote when reading the book in Obsidian. I highly recommend Obsidian for anybody who likes note-taking. I am not sponsored. We are not sponsored. Oh, last thing I'll say before we dive into the actual meat of this. Buy this book if you really want it. I highly recommend it. It's great. And I don't say that, but this is a series. We've done about 7 of these where we've read like some of the big hits of screenwriting world, like Robert Key's Story, Save the Cat. We did Poetics, Aristotle. We've done like the big things that people, the 101 screenwriting books. And I don't think there are only like 2. I think they're as good as this one. This is great. This is
wait, you said this is your second favorite. So what's your...
No, that's not what I said. This is my favorite second screenwriting book.
Your favorite second? Did they write a different one?
No. What I'm saying is, I don't think this is a great first screenwriting book.
Oh, like for you to read? Yes. Okay.
I think this is the best intermediate to advanced screenwriting book that I've ever read. Like it really focuses on important, like nuts and bolts, the things that actually matter from a point of view that's like from actual working artists. It's prescriptive, not descriptive. It's really fantastic. I personally think that what I meant by that is, if you are going totally cold, you don't know anything about screenwriting, you'll read this and get stuff out of it, but you won't get as much out of it if you don't already know the fundamentals of 3-act structure and like what a movie is.
Yeah. It's really like, there's a time for descriptive and there is a time for prescriptive. And this is definitely falls on the descriptive side. So if you come in with like a basic understanding, like if you've read Save the Cat, sorry, John, and then you read this, I think that you would have a good experience because you're going to basically get all the rules in Save the Cat. And then you're going to come in here and you're going to really understand the emotional underpinnings of like why a story is made that way. Right. And like why the choices are made the way that that they're made. So yeah, let's jump into it because I think this was great. And I loved the way that it complemented some of the ways that we talk about screenwriting and the way that it kind of, went against some of the ways that we talk about screenwriting. Not a lot, but some of it did. And so I'm excited to get into it.
Okay. So they open with a basic sort of list of the 20 kind of codified rules of screenwriting and like in Hollywood and like professional screenwriting circles, like the things that you hear over and over and again as like, these are the rules. And we'll just go really quickly over them. It's like a script must be 120 pages or fewer, 12-point Courier font, inciting incident must happen by page 15, first act break must be near page 30, the midpoint's really important, second act break must be near page 90, no scene should be longer than 3 pages, use day or night in scene headings exclusively, Never use cut to because it's an unnecessary filler. No camera directions unless you're also the director of the project. Don't use we see or we hear in scene descriptions. Use uppercase only for sound effects and character introductions. No bold, italics, or asterisks. No action in parentheticals. Don't make asides to the reader in your action descriptions. If it can't be heard or seen, cut it. Don't use the words is or walks as verbs in your sentence. Don't use passive voice. No adverbs ending in ly. No ing verbs. No voiceover. And then he immediately follows this by saying, these are all rules that can be broken. There are exceptions for all of these things. And they go into real depth about like, well, there is a time and a place for passive voice. I think the example they use is the coffin descends into the ground would be a better way than saying they lower the coffin into the ground if you want the focus to be on the coffin, right? Like there are all these exceptions. But these are the basic rules that you're taught when you're starting out. And I would say most of them are good advice. You want your inciting incident probably be in the first 15 pages, but there's a time and a place to not do that. Well, The Lion King, I think, for example, it's like inciting incident doesn't happen for like 20 pages or something.
He kind of shares all these things and then tells you that to a degree it's BS. Like it's all kind of coming from a place of truth, but there is no like national screenwriting convention that decided, like the Chicago Manual of Style for Screenwriters, that decided that this is the way that you want to do it. And that like these pieces of like these rules have kind of come about from script readers getting sick of reading bad screenplays and then noticing some of the commonalities that they have. But to a degree, these are things that happen in a lot of screenplays. And basically, Adam, you've always said it before. It's like, when can you break the rules? It's like, well, when it's good.
Yeah.
Is sort of the frustrating answer. And then he gave some examples they gave some examples of when you can break these rules. And I kind of think that this is a good place to start, but this is sort of just like, basically this chapter in my mind is sort of just like an anchor point where they can start sharing their philosophy for how they approach screenwriting. And so they basically start with, yes, we're acknowledging what other screenwriting books will tell you. And that's not how the screenwriting book is going to go. We're not going to be giving you a template in this particular way. We're not going to be giving you laws in this particular way. A lot of it's a lot more loosey-goosey. And so it really just kind of sets you up for the way that they're going to be approaching story throughout.
For sure. And I think, they go through exceptions to almost all these things. And I think there are exceptions to some of them. I think one that I think we've taught incorrectly over the years was present progressive. Like Mary is cooking dinner versus when I was about 5 years ago, I would have been like, no, it should be Mary cooks dinner. It's a more immediate verb. But there's an example of when like, actually we want to be in the action as she's doing it. It's a better description of like being present with the character. Like if rather than seeing the full action playing out, like Mary cooks dinner is different than Mary is cooking dinner. Or, there's a difference between Mary cooks, there's a knock at the door, and Mary is cooking dinner when there's a knock at the door. That's the example they use.
If it basically, I think it kind of comes down to using the verbs that best and most succinctly convey what is actually happening on the screen in the moment. Like they're not saying that this always works. Like that in general, you could say like, John is walking down the hall. John is opening his locker. John is flipping through the stuff. It's like, no, at that point, you do want to probably switch to present tense stuff. But it's more like when it makes sense, when it is good, it is okay to use these present, whatever it's called. I don't know it in English, but like the continuing verb, right? The like is cooking in order to basically interrupt it. So when it better signifies time, break the rule.
The way they said it very well here is if a screenplay is good and it articulates a blueprint for a potentially great movie, no one cares how much it adheres to these standards. But these are all just standards, ways of thinking about things. But let's get that out of the way. That was kind of their initial like this is what everybody knows and everybody says, and it's good advice most of the time, but there's always an exception.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan has a little chapter, which I thought was interesting. And I think for these celebrity chapters, we're just going to briefly go over them because most of them are anecdotal to their story and they're interesting, I think, in the context of the books. We also want to save some stuff for the book. My big takeaway, what was your big takeaway from the Christopher Nolan thing, Alexie?
I highlighted a few different parts and I found myself very frustrated because I would start highlighting and then I would notice that it was like the quote that they, like the pull quote that they use.
Oh yeah, they do that a lot in the book.
Yeah, so it's like if you're looking at the book, basically like
nobody can see that, Alexie.
Well, you can see that this has a pull quote.
Yeah.
So like you're reading the chapter or the paragraph and you're like, wow, that was really smart. I'm going to highlight it. Then as soon as you finish highlighting it, you see that they've done the pull quote right below it. But yeah, basically one of the things that he said that I thought really worked was basically it's advice I'd heard before, but it's always worth hearing again, to stop kind of in the middle. So rather than pushing yourself to finish the scene, like, you've worked 9 to 5, now you want to stay till 6 to finish this scene, to like finish this idea, just stop in the middle so that you know where to pick up next time. And also kind of
leave the day, like write the first page of the next scene before you log off at night.
And that was actually tied to something else that someone said later that I can't remember who said it, but it was something that ties to this that I thought was pretty brilliant, which is the moment they finished a screenplay, they started the first crappy page of their next screenplay, like immediately. So like never leaving it on a period.
So you think of that as like kind of, it's more of just like psychological framing to motivate yourself and how you see your, like, because if you just finished a thing and you spent a huge amount of work, sometimes if you let time pass, it'd be like, oh, and I got to climb the mountain again. Whereas if you do the first day of the next mountain, the moment you finish something big, a big project, you have the psychological fortitude. But like in terms of like his approach, what did you think about the specific story of like him writing his first movie and like trying to do nonlinear structure, but without like really formatting it?
That was interesting because it really talks about something that he does say is he talks about like the kinetic energy of your script and kind of just like, that kind of ties into this idea of like your story having momentum. And to loosely summarize what he says, he's talking about writing, it was either Memento or the one before, where basically his first approach was, you know what, I'm going to write this chronologically and then I'm going to cut it up and I'm going to intersperse it all throughout so that I know for sure that the story is solid, and then I can do my weird timeline thing, my like discontinuity type thing. And what he found is that didn't work because essentially these scenes were not connected to each other. Like, yes, he checked and made sure that the story flowed. And like, yes, technically that was correct, but it was basically just separate scenes that had no sort of kinetic energy or momentum to flow between them because they were just chopped up and smashed together. And so now, no matter what kind of freaky deaky structure he's trying to play with, when he writes, he goes from page 1 to page 123 or 200 or whatever he does now without jumping around. So just telling it as the audience would experience it is something that really helps him. And that was interesting to me because that's a question we get a lot, is how do you do these weird timelines?
Well, what I was also thinking of, when I think of Chris Nolan, I think of these cerebral plots and like the structure, like Tenet, like being backwards and forward as a perfect palindrome of itself. Like I think of these like intellectually rich subjects and executions, and you can clearly tell that that's his obsession. That's what's interesting to him. But he also mentions that like, the writing process is not intellectual. It's really important to be emotionally connected to the story as it unfolds when you're writing. But the way he sort of gets inspired is that he front loads the intellectual aspect of it, like the idea, the structure of the world. He thinks about those things really deeply before he starts the writing, but sort of doesn't put his editorial hat on until after he's written. Like, it's kind of, everybody has ways to trick themselves into writing things they like and that they're excited by. It was just interesting to hear, oh yeah, this guy does that too, no matter how successful,
And actually, though, that seemed to be a trend, at least in the first half of the book, with all these. Basically, the way the structure of the book works is that there's chapter of John August and Craig Mazin talking about something, and then excerpts from an interview that's kind of like loosely connected to these ideas, and then chapter, and then interview, and then alternating. And something that I noticed, at least in the first half of this book, is that it seems like pretty much all the people that they're talking that they brought in are talking about how they front load the work. Like, they might be talking about it in different ways, but a lot of it is like, I let this idea sit with me, I like let it ruminate, and then I just do the thing. Like, it seems like that's the pattern that a lot of the people are talking about, which is interesting, because I know that no one seems to be very strict in their outlining either from the people that they're pulling from. Like, they're very, very detailed in the way that they think through it, but not necessarily in the way that they outline, and then they write it in one go. Just something I noticed now, kind of looking back, is I don't think they had anyone who said, like, I do note cards, I stick to it, I really I don't front load anything, I find it as,
And this is, I think, one of the problems, I think, with many of the first screenwriting books, is that they present a very intellectually coherent, this is the way to do things, this is a plan. And when you don't know anything about writing, you stick to, wait, that's the way to do it, that's the formula, that's the framework, because that's what you have to hold on to. Because you don't have experience, you don't really have a sense of emotional problem solving in the weeds, tying scenes together, convoluted character motivation. The actual true work of writing is really complicated and connected to point of view, and it's these they're putting together this rich mosaic of moments and scenes. Books don't know how to represent that because there isn't a way necessarily. And I think all these writers, they have their way of, okay, this is the intellectual part of it, and then here's the emotional, intuitive part of it. And then here's the editorial third section where I have to go look at what I thought I was writing, what I actually wrote, and put it together in a way that makes sense. That's the hard stuff. And I think if I had to tell writers who are beginning at their journeys and they've just read, one of the first screenwriting books or taken a course or something, I would tell them, trust your intuition and your feelings more than you do the plan. Because Chris Nolan had a plan. When he's get excited about, he was talking about The Following, his first script. And he was talking about how, okay, I knew it was going to be non-linear and the end was going to be integrated to the beginning. So he wrote the script linearly, and then he cut up the scenes and presented them out of order. And when he read that, it was a total failure because that's not a three-act story. That's not the kinetic experience of a movie. But a first-time writer, which he was, would have that idea of, oh, that's the structure, that's how it's going to work. But the intuitive experience you get of actually solving these problems, putting your face in the words and trying to untangle things, and then you read it back later as an editor, the reality of what you thought you were writing, what you actually made, and then trying to make that make sense and match the dream of what you thought you were writing, that's hard shit.
It is. But I do think that it's not even a counterpoint, but I think that probably the experience that he had of writing it all chronologically and then cutting it up was an important part of how he came to his solution, because it showed him what was important and what wasn't, right? So it's as a brand new writer, you might be trying out these kind of rigid structures and things, and I think the merit of them is that you finish, is that you can finish, they can help you get over the finish line by really putting up the bumpers and holding your hands. And yes, the bumpers are there and they're really going to keep you in a straight line, and that might not be the way that that you want the movie ultimately to be. But if you kind of start in that place, you at least finish, and then you can look back and be like, you know what, this didn't have the emotional underpinning that I wanted. It didn't have the kinetic energy that I wanted. But now that I kind of know what this looks like, I'm going to do it again. and I trust myself more now because I've finished a screenplay, which 99% of writers don't do. And then now I can rewrite that screenplay differently. So I think that was kind of my takeaway from it, is like, that there's merit to these things that we try that are more structured. And then,
but every writer is different. Like for some people, those bumper rails could be totally demotivating and deflating and kill the energy for some people. Whereas for other people, it's safety net where that they could feel they could solve. And I think you have to know and discover for yourself through just the act of doing, where do you get energy and how do you preserve the energy? How do you finish? Because
I was going to say, how do you finish is the big question. Because like, I might not necessarily get energy from the process of, I do, because I'm a nerd. I might not get energy from the process of sitting down and doing a tentpole document, but I know that if I just try to stream of conscious it, I will not finish. And so, you know, I think that there can be a distinction between like, what do you naturally want to do, and what do you know it will take for you to get over the finish line with it, at least for the first draft. So that's
and it kind of goes back to the classic thing: are you a gardener or an architect? Are you somewhere in between? And you actually won't know until you write your first script. And that can also change. You can be someone who needs the hardcore outline in the beginning, and then discover, I need to be surprised to actually get through. I need to surprise myself. It's just after the fact, is like, where do you editorialize? Anyway, moving on.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. I really loved these 5 questions that they ask to pressure test an idea. How do you, when you have an idea for a story, are you actually the person to write this? And is this the movie that you actually want to spend your time and energy writing? These are the 5 questions. Would you pay money to see this? Is this a story that wants to be told on a screen? Is this something new, timely? Is it too timely? Like, is this just the flavor of the month, and by the time you finish it, the flavor is going to be out? Do we want to spend time with these characters? Not necessarily likable, but are they compelling? And then finally, are you the right writer for this? This is just a really great, I think, way to center. So many writers I know, they they write the first idea that comes in their head, or they write like an early version of something. They've talked themselves into being excited about something, but they actually wouldn't watch this movie if it came out. You know,
and that can happen sometimes though. Like if you're doing like sometimes with first ideas that you get, you're like, that is a very exciting idea to me because I can feel that it works. Like as a storyteller, you can feel that the pieces are there, like that the story engine is strong. And that is a very exciting thing. But then if you trying to take that step back and be like, okay, would I actually pay money to see this? Like think about the things that you've actually paid money on. Like if I was going to go sit down and watch it streaming and I found out that nobody's streaming it, I'm gonna have to pay $16 to rent it. Am I just gonna move on, or is this something that I actually would want to see? And it's funny to put yourself in that situation now. Now I'm also like, would I go through the trouble of getting a babysitter so that I could get to the movies and see this? It's like my bar has just gone up a little bit for like for the things that I would fight to see. But it's a good way to think about it, because it's like, think about the movies that are your favorite movies, and does this kind of slot in with them in some way? It doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but is there something that makes your idea kind of fit in to the landscape of all your favorite ideas or your favorite movies? So I thought that was a good one. And then the second question is this a story that wants to be told on screen? And this is one that he kind of breaks down a little bit later. Right after these 5 questions, we talk a little bit about like, okay, it's a screen, what kind of screen? But this is really like, is this secretly a novel? Like, is this a stage play? Like, is it something else?
Yes,
Just
and
kind of
I
thinking,
think there's some
yeah.
really great questions they have later on, specifically
Hmm.
like the difference in a movie idea and a TV idea, which is to ask, what are the stakes? Is movies are about life, extraordinary life transforming events, like you got to do this, or your parents are going to get divorced. You got to do this, or the world's going to blow up. Whereas television stories are more about life living. It's like
Yeah.
the classic example I remember hearing ages ago was Star Wars, the movie, is about blowing up the Death Star. Star Wars, the television show, is about working on the Death Star as a janitor or something, right? Like,
Something that I thought was really clever about the way that he put this, because I don't know why it had never occurred to me, was like, he was like, if you're always kind of chasing the new thing, like if you kind of want like new, fresh, exciting, you probably are going to be drawn to features over TV. And it was interesting to me that he put it that way, because I think just it's obvious in retrospect, but I think that the way that TV had always been talked about to me was, it was kind of like, this is a newer frontier. It's new, it's fresh, it's exciting. But ultimately, what's happening is, like, with TV, you, excluding the mini series that are like actually a movie drawn out, you're coming back to the same places with the same people doing the
mm-hmm.
same things, changing slowly, so slowly over time. Ultimately, a lot of the lessons are, you're good enough the way you are, like in a sitcom, like they're like, I think
Yes,
I'm gonna leave the neighborhood.
like there's a
And
lot of plots that are like episode specific, like I'm going to move to Maine and never come back and go to law school, but by the end it's like, no, I've got to stay here with you guys at the commune. you know
yeah.
you know
The
it's
commune.
like, right, or
Yeah.
wherever it is, right? Like they're workplace sitcoms, and they're family sitcoms, right?
Yeah.
That's most of those television stories. And we're getting outside of the bounds of that, but basically asking yourself some good questions are like, okay, is the idea you have, is it best expressed as a transformational singular event,
Hmm.
or a long-standing environment with many events that can happen? I think that's a good question to ask yourself. And I think the one that I think we talk a lot about: are you the right writer for this? Like,
Yeah.
should you write a story about ancient Mongolia if you're from Austria? Who knows? If with enough research, maybe, but like, is that a wise use of your time? you know
And also,
Lived
it's like,
experience
is
is
that the
important.
yeah, it's like, is that something that you would be best for? There was something I'm going to try to find what exactly he said, because it was something
Sure.
that was it was essentially saying, like, this is going to cut both ways, type of a thing. It's like, it's not just, are you the best writer for this? It's, is this the best story for you? Right. And I think that a lot of times when people
Mm.
hear the question of, like, are you the right writer for this? What they hear is, you're not allowed to write this
Yeah, you can't
because,
do this, rather
yeah,
than you could do something so much better
yeah,
for
something
you.
that is really suits your sensibilities, that you have
Yeah.
a super unique, authentic lens on. And I think that that was a good way to put it, because it's always hard to talk about that with people, because people don't like to be told, you can't do that. You know, it's like,
Because there's a
yeah,
fundamental raw thing about this too, that another aspect is more about insider versus outsider points of view, right?
yeah,
And with a lot of research, you can do a lot of things. Like, I don't want to, there you can do more is possible than like the black and white, you're not allowed to write this. But
right.
you know, acknowledging your ignorance of like domains of culture and knowledge, like it takes a lifetime to be an insider of a culture, because because where you were born, where you were raised up, the little things, the little details that make something feel true, good, real, and awesome, that's earned over time. And like, why not access your insider knowledge as a writer
Hmm.
about the things that you don't even value consciously? But the
Yeah,
point number four, I think, is also really underrated. Do we want to spend time with these characters? And
yeah,
I see this so often happen with like proxy characters, Mary Sue characters, Where like this is basically based on my life story, like, and I'm inserting myself, and then you insert a boring version of yourself that's adverse to conflict, and that's not somebody I want to spend time with. That's not an interesting person. It's not like a
Yeah.
compelling situation or a compelling inner life, because I think so many beginning writers, they really aren't willing or ready to really reflect their own inner rot as humans and put that into
Yeah.
situations. You know, and say what you will about I've been rereading A Song of Ice and Fire recently. George R. R. Martin, he really knows how to show his inner rot, like in the worst bad things they could possibly think about. Like, and that's why it's interesting. That's why those characters are interesting. Is like they're terrible people. Everyone's a terrible person or is capable of terrible things, you know. And then when a moment of virtue or beauty happens, it's in spite of the reality of, you know, hard won. Anyway, I'm just rambling, but
no,
it's so uninteresting, non-conflict.
Well, in this question, so there's 5 questions if you're just listening, and question 3 is it saying something new or timely, or is it too timely? And question 4 is, do we want to spend time with these characters? And yes. I feel like these 2 questions is why I really advise people for their first script not to write the deep personal one. For the first one that you're gonna do, because like so many people when they start out, they're like, it's the story on their heart, right? It is like the story of their life. That is the one that is calling to them, and it's because of question 5. Are you the right writer for this? They're like, this is my life. I know this with certainty. I know this deeply, and that's true. But then they write something that they've not yet had the
skill.
They don't have the skill yet to deliver something on that, and they might not necessarily have the perspective yet to get into all of their own flaws, because oftentimes they're making themselves the protagonist. And so those 2 questions are the big reasons why I think it's so important to balance.
This is how you know it was me and not AI. Punished.
Or persevere. Yeah.
I wrote these this morning. Okay, be kind. Okay, let's move on. There's some really great stuff here. Michael Schur, the creator of The American Office with Greg Daniels, or he's one of the head writers of The American Office, who was the creator of Parks and Rec and The Good Place, had some takes on television stories I thought were interesting, but we're just going to briefly. The nugget I thought was formula. He had this really interesting idea of like what made The American Office interesting was that it was decentering the love story, which made it more scarce. So when you had exposure to it, it was through a quick glance at the edge of the camera, and it made people want more of it. It took like the wacky, horrible boss, who's usually a fringe side character, became the focus. But that was interesting. And he also just talks about the raw utility of talking heads in mockumentary, which I thought was really interesting. Because you think about it, you can cut to a talking head to set up a joke, to give expositional information, to transition from 2 scenes, to juxtapose a really emotionally sincere moment with a joke that's related. And you can also just use it as a weapon to show real character, because when somebody's doing a talking head, the character acknowledges that they're doing an interview for the camera. And when a character is observed, they're different than they would be if they are unobserved, because you act differently when you're alone versus when a camera's in the room with you.
Yeah, I mean, imagine Abbott Elementary without the talking head. It's like, it's a core part of the story. Like the structure that they've created with it is like an intrinsic part of how the story is told. And that was pretty cool. I thought that this was going to be your favorite part, Adam, when he talks about how there's 2 different ways to develop an idea. It's
clearly not, because I just wrote. I know.
Now I'm kind of shocked.
I was like, okay. I think you should write Inside Out. That's my opinion. I think that's more interesting all the time.
I think I take issue.
That's just my opinion.
No.
For me,
Well,
he agrees with you.
he agrees
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
So no,
I
so
think it means
basically
different things, and he has a bias. He comes from the place he comes from.
he's
So
very biased. Yeah. So basically what he says is there's two different ways to write, outside in or inside out. And so it's sort of like when he was talking about the way that he came up with The Good Place, and for him, an outside in writer would have said afterlife. I want to do a show about the afterlife, and then kind of like worked from there, like been like, who's going to be there? What's it like? What's the deal? But the way that he came up with The Good Place was inside out. And so he said, what if it is, I want to make a show about what it means to be a good person. And so that's where he started. And then he started asking a question about, like, what if it's a show about a woman who's made some really bad choices and then now she's being judged for them? And then, oh, okay, what if it's the afterlife? What if she's hanging out with a guy who like talks a lot about like the philosophy of being a good person? What if all these different things? And so he's going from the inside, the thematic question of like, what's it mean to be a good person, and then going out. And I think that my objection, which is actually not really an objection, is just that I think that ideas come from anywhere and everybody kind of has their own way into ideas. And that ultimately, if you come into something from the outside, all that matters is that you need to get inside of the idea.
well, there's a thing he omitted explicitly,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is the most important thing, which is asking yourself dramatic questions. He
Yeah.
asked himself the right question. You could ask that from the outside or the inside, which is, who's the most interesting person for there to be a story about being what it means to be a good person? A
Yeah.
terrible person who's sent to a good place accidentally, right? Like there's a logic. Like he asked himself a really good question, which is, okay, I'm trying to make a show about, he has his inside meat, like his philosophical statement, but he asked himself the right questions. And that's what separates great writers from, or experienced writers from inexperienced writers, is
Yeah.
experienced writers know what questions to ask themselves to get to good stuff. And yeah, you could start with, oh, I want to write a show about the afterlife and get to similar places. But it's about the questions he asked himself, not whether he started where he
Yeah.
started specifically.
Well, and it's true though that like basically his whole everything in his show is based around the idea of like, what does it mean to be a good person? And that's like his thematic question that kind of ties everything together. And it can be hard to come to that place when you start outside. So I think that, that's like there's a reason why I see the argument for trying to start inside and then going outward. So like starting with like the emotions, the theme that you want to play with, but I don't
But
think
that's
it's
like
the
the red
only
meat.
way.
But that's the
Yeah,
red meat,
it
like you
is.
have
You
to get there no
need
matter
it.
what.
You
Whether
have
you
to get
start
there.
exactly,
Yeah.
you can have that with a shaky exterior, but you
Yeah.
can't have the exterior without the inside. Like you need the
Hmm.
philosophical idea, the good stuff. That is a great point by Orlando. The idea of outside in is that's really interesting. Setting is secondary to character, or it's primary to character, but goes to the question at the end anyway. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think the best settings are secondary to character dilemma. Like you don't pick a character situation that isn't integrated to the setting dramatically. Right?
Right.
You need to pick the right place for the situation. I think is really important. If you're just casually saying it's in Toronto or in a city, and you're like, well, is that the best dramatic place for this story? Like, I think
Yeah.
the best stories have the setting is causing problems for the characters. I really believe that. Or at the very least, you have conflict integrated between those elements. Let's continue on to a
Yes.
really meaty idea, which I
Protagonist.
really hadn't heard. This is something that's like screenwriting 101. We all know what a protagonist is and what's important about a character, but they define three different qualities in a way that I hadn't thought about exactly this way before. They separate out the terms hero, main character, and protagonist in a really interesting way. And the way he defines it here, the hero is the character that the audience roots for, that you want to see win. They don't have to be a good person, but you're rooting for them. Like Jon Snow's a hero, or whatever. The main character is the person the story's about, like the title character. And there are often stories where like, oh well, the main character is Shrek because the movie Shrek is also the hero. But there are versions of like there's stories about Henry VIII where it's about Henry VIII, but really the protagonist is, I don't know, I picked Henry VIII. Like, there are stories where the titular character isn't the protagonist or isn't the person you're rooting for. So I thought that was an interesting definitional thing. But then the way they define protagonist, it's the character who transforms over the course of the story, traveling from point A to point B, figuratively or literally. They learn how to grow as the story progresses. Generally, they want something at the start of the tale, and over the course of the journey, discover they need something else. This is a solid protagonist definition, but I did think it was interesting to separate it out, who the story's about versus who transforms.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Up. Do you remember?
Yes.
All those years ago, when John analyzed Up, he was saying that, what's his name? Carl? Yeah. That he is the protagonist, and then he kind of positioned Russell as the antagonist. Wasn't that his analysis of that film?
Yeah, which I think is actually wrong. I do too, but absolutely wrong. Yeah.
But then that's why it came back up for me, because I think that he was pointing to something in these dynamics here of like who was actually
a great example they use here is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because Ferris Bueller's the titular character. You would never say Ferris Bueller is not the protagonist, but he isn't, because he doesn't change and he doesn't really have a journey.
Yeah.
He's the hero you're rooting for and the main character, but Cameron is the protagonist because Cameron has the character arc.
Yeah. And Ferris is kind of a turd.
Oh, but he's great. That's why we like him, because he's gets
great,
away.
But he's kind of a turd, right?
Of course. Yeah, he's a troublemaker, right? Yeah. He gets away with everything, right? But he has nothing to learn because he's already like Cameron had to learn how to stand up to his dad, is the protagonist character arc of the story. But like, it's interesting that the main character who we follow, who we're rooting for, actually isn't the character who changes. I thought that was a great example to separate out these three terms. From a functional point of view, though, this is all intellectualizing bullshit. The important thing is making sure that you have strong central characters who the story moves around. Like this is just book club energy advice, which is interesting, but that's not really helpful for you as a writer, you know.
A lot of I found that a lot of this is kind of book club energy, like a lot of the advice. Like that's why I think that this is, like what you said, is a good second screenwriting book, because I think that a lot of it is kind of like, let's think about why these pieces are the way they are, and like let's think about the ways in which they work together, but not necessarily like literally. Well,
some of it, I think there is some really useful advice, especially later on.
I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's great to talk about why these things work the way they work. It just, a lot of it is
because
sort of like
it comes down to the way it's useful. I think comes down to widening your knowledge base to solve problems when you're in the thick of it, and knowing what questions to ask yourself of the process when you're in it is what separates great results from poor results, frustration from flow state. And this type of knowledge helps you broaden your awareness of the problems, so you can ask yourself better questions. That's what I think is the benefit. The way I use the word book club energy with a derogatory is it's information that's interesting but doesn't help you solve problems.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of it more as just like kind of like what you were saying. Like this
the
is
idea
like
of hero versus main character versus protagonist, like that's not going to help you solve a problem in your script the way the later stuff does, like of understanding causality and plot.
Yeah.
Like that's
it could help you though. Wow. Yeah,
sure.
It could help you by looking at the script that you have, that you feel like something's not working, and saying, are they a hero? Are they also a main character? And are they also the protagonist?
Yes.
Or have I done something?
It's a question you ask yourself once, rather than every day.
A side note though,
yeah,
everyone. So I haven't seen Big Fish, and you really need to see Big Fish to get a lot of the references that he's talking about.
You haven't seen Big Fish?
No, I was like,
that's
did
like
he write Big Fish?
He wrote Big Fish. Yeah, that was one of his big breaks.
That's why I was like,
That's a really
didn't know
sweet movie.
I need to watch it. Wow. Apparently,
it's one of the good Tim Burton movies.
I saw Tim. I don't love Tim Burton, and so
It's one of
that's
the good, like I said, it's one of the good Tim Burton
one of the
movies.
good. Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's a little more grounded in reality. It's good. It's well, honestly, John August has written 5 Tim Burton movies, so maybe you don't like John August.
Oh, I want to talk about this next one.
Yes, this is
So
great.
it's part of the
Want
same
versus
chapter.
need.
Yes. And the thing that so we're kind of getting into a combo of objective and motivation and flaw and inner need in this section. Like
Those are
it's
the young
sort of,
screenwriters terms. It's a
yeah.
simplification, which I think is actually pretty good.
Yeah. And so basically what he says, he sums it up very, very succinctly. He's like, you don't need any of that crap. You don't need to think about what do they want, what do they need, what blah blah blah. What you need to know is why is the character doing what they're doing? And so why is the character doing what they're doing? So why are they trying to, you know, win the race is kind of his example that he kept coming back to. Like, why do they need to win this race? And when you answer, you need to have a better answer than like, oh, they just want to. Like, you need to start
Yes.
getting deeper into like, because usually people will have multiple answers for that question in real life. Like, if you're really dedicating that much of your time to like, Adam, why do you want to be a screenwriter? It's not just going to be one answer. People go really deep. They have the like superficial answers of like what they want. Like, I want to see my work up there. I want to have money. I want to have this kind of accolade, but then also it gets at the need. Like, there's stories that I need to tell. I need to share these with, sort of, it gets at both of them. But what it does that's so smart is that it ties it to what they're doing. It ties it to the action, and like
Yes.
movies are all action. And so it's very directly like, it makes flaw and inner need intrinsically connected to motivation and objective.
And asking this question of yourself is an example of what I was talking about, of like, experienced writers know the right question to ask themselves. This is one of those questions. You will never not be happy that you've asked this question of any part of your story. You should always know, for every single character, why are they doing what they're doing, and does it make sense on an emotional level, on an external level, right? Like, and so much of the stuff we were talking about of like, just the big thematic ideas of like, oh, the character grows and changes, or the character, needs to go from point A to point B. Why are they trying to buy milk at the grocery store right now?
Yeah.
Is it because they know their dad is lactose intolerant and that they're going to put it in his cereal, swap out the oat milk or whatever? Like why are they doing that? Like, to have a good answer for that, you understand your story, and you understand, like, it's an underrated question when you're like in the thick of it. Wait,
Yeah.
why are they doing this?
It works on it works macro and micro, right? So like micro, it's like, yeah, we need to know why they're doing what they're doing in the different scenes. Otherwise, like, why is it in the movie? But then you also need to know why they are trying to achieve the big thing that they're trying to achieve. And a quote that I wanted to read from this that I think ties into it. This is one of the most formulaic things that they ever said, at least in this first half of the book, was, no matter what you choose to show, or how you choose to show what the character wants, it's important to remember that you are making a contract with the audience. Once you establish that your hero wants X, it is your obligation to show them working to get X.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting, because that was like one of the most hard lines that they drew in this first little bit. And it's a really important one of like, basically, so why does your character want what they want? And once you need to show it to us. And then once you show it to us, it has to matter. So it ties into our lovely acronym for objectives in general. So like timely, important, right? Tangible.
All consuming. Yeah, tangible.
Yeah, specific. And so it ties into all those things of like, you have to show us what they want, but it can't be they kind of want it. The rest of the movie is about what are they going to do to get there, and we need to know why.
I think they list some great examples of like, how do you show a character what they want? One example is to show them in a moment of longing, have them tell us what they want. That's not a bad idea. Like through a conversation, like, I want the big job, or having them refuse an opportunity, right? Like this happens a lot in Hallmark movies. Like, I'm not going to take the big promotion because I want to, whatever.
I'm going back to Alabama, and I'm gonna help my
I'm going to
mom
build
with
that
her
log,
bakery.
build the log cabin, build the bakery. And they brought up an example of the I want songs that are, so in musical theater and musicals in general, there's a structural obligation that you have to do. Every musical has an I want song, which is the protagonist singing a song about the thing they want most in the world. Right? It's a very functional thing. You can't have a musical without an I want song. In Wicked Part 1, or just Wicked.
I was about to say,
it's, do you know what it is? It's The Wizard and I. She talks about, I want to, not be green, but also I want to be with the wizard. We can solve great things together, and I'm going to learn magic.
She's like dancing around with her book at school and like skipping over stones and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, part of your world and the Little Mermaid. Every single musical ever has a song like this, but it's fulfilling a very functional point. I would think in your script, what's your I want scene?
Yeah.
And how are you showing it? And be better than having them refuse the big job in the city. Do something more interesting than that. But I think it's a structural element.
Take on it. It's just like, do a unique take on them refusing the big job in the city. But I think that example, I think, was good because it's showing that it's not just what they choose to do, it's showing us what they choose not to do. And basically just giving, I think that was kind of the hopefully the takeaway of including refusing an opportunity as something. It's sort of like the things that you show them not doing are just as valuable. But anyway.
And one more note on this chapter. We all know it. It's great advice. You love your protagonists. You don't want them to suffer, but you got to make bad things happen for them, for growth and change to feel good. You really be mean to your characters. Have horrible things happen to them. And it's just a magic trick. It's a cheat code for making things interesting. And I know I have this impulse when I'm writing sometimes, like, I don't think of the worst thing. I don't, that's ugly. That doesn't feel bad. I like these people. Now that being said, it's relative to the genre you're trying to write. If you're writing a Hallmark movie, the parameters of worse is different. You don't have the mom die in scene 1 of that, in that type of soft, gentle world where nobody dies.
So here's a great question. Yeah. Do you think the I want moment can be subtle, or do you think overt is the best way to go? I feel like if the audience themselves can infer the want, it's that much more powerful. What do you think?
Depends on the story, depends on the character. Having something be overt can be powerful if there's contrast. I think that's my answer. If everything else is overt, having a subtle choice can be more powerful. But if everything is subtle, having an overt choice can be more powerful. It's contextual on what just happened and where are we going, I think.
I'm going to take a hard line. I think it needs to actually be very overt, but I think the question that it's kind of pointing to is more about the way in which you drop that exposition. So I think that sometimes they really put it in your face, with the I want songs, but I think that it always needs to be very clear what they want, because that's the driving thing of what they're trying to do in the movie. We need to know what they're trying to do at some point early on. We need to know what their goal is very clearly, but it doesn't have to be exposition dump. It can be that we know it very clearly because of the way that they looked at the thing, the trophy, the vaccine, the dying person that they want to save. It can be the way in which you convey that information can be subtle, but I think it should never ever be wishy-washy. I'm not quite sure. Does that make sense? I think overt is always the answer, but just the way in which you relay that information does not have to be an exposition dump.
I think the word I would use is clarity.
Yes.
The audience has to understand it. That's all that matters. It whether or not, and the word overt can have a negative connotation with artless or unsubtle, right? You can have something be subtle and absolutely clear if you've done your job.
Clarity. That's a good. Yeah.
But moving on to relationships, I don't want
Great
to spend too much
chapter.
time on this chapter because there is a few really interesting ideas. I think that the way they sort of the way they kind of talk about chemistry and
That
different
was
types of
clever.
people interacting. Alexie, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I thought it was really clever. Basically, they point out that we like when characters have chemistry. And then when you think about like, okay, what does that word actually mean, chemistry? You're thinking about, you know, what you do when you're practicing chemistry in your little lab. You're putting these two chemicals together a lot of times that are stable
Two
on
of the
their
same
own.
thing aren't going to create the reaction that two
No.
different things will. Like
Yeah,
like
you
the
want something that
introvert,
bubbles up and froths and is
yes,
dramatic.
the
Um,
introvert and the extrovert having a scene together will probably have more intrigue, and obviously there are exceptions, intrigue and interest than the extrovert and the extrovert.
mhm. Or two people who don't talk, usually.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically,
Yeah,
like, you need you're creating a chemical reaction when you put these characters together, and that's how you create something interesting, is it's like, how is everything that they both do creating a reaction, creating drama just by virtue of them kind of being together. It's sort of like it's like the buddy cop thing, or it's like if you're going to put two people in an elevator, the two people are trapped in an elevator, what's going to go boom? It's thinking of chemistry like that as like an active thing, or like these two pieces that just can't help themselves when they're
yeah,
put
and I
together.
wouldn't also just think of it in terms of like this is a blue character and this is a yellow character and mixed green. Like that's a shallow way of thinking of it. You could have two extroverts, but one's parents just got divorced and the other's having the best day of their life. Like the emotional state of the characters and the context of where they are, or the vocabulary, their education background. Like you can make 100 distinguishing qualities to what makes a person.
I think,
Making it
yeah.
present tense drama and combining those is so much of the richness of relationships, in my view.
Yeah, rather than like mixing two colors, you want them to mix like Coke and Mentos. It's like
Yeah,
you want your
whatever it
characters.
is, it has to create
Yeah,
tension.
yeah,
But this other idea I thought was just really interesting was how we show relationships with visual language. And they have this example of, showing a family at an airport and like, okay, how do we establish that they're related, without having clunky dialogue that's like, mom, dad, or how do we challenge our assumptions about the visual information? And they have an example of like, we see a family lovingly together and two officers walk by, and then the kids give $50 to the parents who you thought were parents and say, hey, thanks for watching us, and then like walk away. Like, so, oh, wow, we had an assumption that this was a family, but really it's these kids are hiding from those officers and they paid off those adults, right? Like,
yeah,
playing with what we think we know with a visual and then like introducing new information. Oh, we thought this relationship was this way, but really it was different. And they have this whole bit about how you want to be giving clues to misdirect and direct the audience,
yeah.
whether that's visual information or that's the dialogue that's stated, what we think relationships are, how they really are. It's good shit.
Yeah, and I think something that I also thought was interesting is like, even though this chapter is really talking about relationships between characters, they always like sneak in broader words of wisdom. And so one of the things that they talked about here was basically our window of tolerance as an audience, and the ways in like kind of like the heartbeat, the ebb and flow of a story. And so one of them was like, so say we do that thing. Say you see two adults and two kids together. We think they're a family. Officers leave. Kids pay the adults. Now it becomes clear that this was just like these are two very precocious kids hiding from the law for some reason, and those were not their parents. So that was one time you tricked me as an audience. If you keep tricking me over and over and over again, if every single time you set something up, you pull it back, it's going to lose its impact. And so basically they said they gave it like a percentage, like basically 4 out of 5 times you want to deliver on what you were implying. So I think it kind of goes back to Orlando's question. It's like if the audience can infer for themselves what the character wants, then that can be a strong place. And so if you're playing with the audience and their expectations. And so like you're treating them like, we're saying, oh, I'm implying that this is a family. You're smart. You get it. You were wrong. That's fun. 1 time out of 5. We want to basically fulfill that contract that they talked about before, like fulfill the expectations that people are making, and then sometimes subvert it. So that was just kind of like a little bit of advice interspersed in there, which like kind of like the rhythm of a story, where if you want things to still be surprising, you have to let them kind of stand on their own a bit, not have every single thing be surprising.
Another really interesting idea that I thought was one of the more sophisticated notes of the book was this idea of doing 2 things at the same time, like having character moments integrated with narrative functionality in the plot moving forward. And, it's easy to fall into a false dichotomy. Is this a character moment or is this a story moment? No, it's both all the time. It's your job as a writer to make every story moment a character moment and every character moment a story moment. What do I mean by story moment? Oh, the plot needs to move from point A to point B. Character moment. Oh, we're learning about the inner life of this person, what they care about, and they're growing and turning as the story moves forward. Every single plot scene, and they have some examples about like, plot scenes without character is boring, and character scenes without plot get cut, right? So like the scene of the witty banter between the 2 characters,
in the
like,
coffee shop,
or just even like on the elevator on the way to the job or whatever, that will get cut from the movie if it isn't important to the scene. Like if they're in the elevator and they're diffusing the bomb, like, and if you cut that elevator scene and you don't see the characters diffuse the bomb, then it doesn't make sense to go from where you were going to where you went. But if you have them just diffusing the bomb and they're just talking about stuff without character being interspersed, it's boring. So how do you have character emotional dynamics integrated with necessary plot scenes? And I think honestly, Kurt Vonnegut had this advice, which is if you have a single sentence in your story that doesn't move the plot forward or reveal character, cut that sentence. But what they're saying here is from a scene level, if you have a single scene in your story that's not revealing character and moving the plot forward, you should make it do so.
And this party people led to the invention of sexposition, so that you can keep your sex scenes in the movie by seeding in.
I think that's actually I don't think that's revealing character though. That's just exposition and something. And look at this.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but it's like
that's not quite what they're talking about. But yeah.
No, it's not. It's sort of like abusing what they're talking about. Like where it's like, well, we can't cut the sex scene because he's talking about how they're going to sneak into the castle. It's like,
you need to explain the tax policy of the realm because you won't understand that the characters can make tax fraud without it. But let's show some butts. To make that more interesting.
Yeah,
it's the Pope and it's actually from Save the Cat.
Pope in the Pool. Yeah,
which we're not going to get more into because this is script notes and not Save the Cat. And the way they kind of end this idea, which is if I need X to happen, so Y happens. So if I need a scene, if I have a scene where it exists to show something else, that alone isn't enough. You need to make sure that the relationships and the character are also integrated into those scenes and moments.
It's the 2 tracks that we talk about, like where you have like 2 tracks of a film. You have the character's inner life and like their relationships, their wants, their needs, and whatever. And then you also have the plot track, which is like objective and stakes. And that for a scene to be a good scene and to justify being in the movie, it needs to be an essential piece on both of those tracks. Like if something only exists on one track or the other, then it's either not going to be rewarding or is not going to make it into the final cut of the film.
And they move on to this idea of allegiances and allies. And I thought this was a really smart way of talking about something that is so common and so under talked about, which is the people in your character's life, your protagonist's life. They serve a functionality. And enemies are easier to write for a lot of people because the conflict is more clear. And sometimes the best friend character is almost always the worst written character in a movie, because
Yeah.
they exist just out of raw functionality. And this is one of the reasons why your hero needs side characters, to have someone to talk to expose different aspects of the hero's protagonist and inner life, to provide stakes for the hero. Like if you don't have the dying mom character in that one scene in the beginning, you won't know that they're, trying to raise money for the dying mom, right? Like it's so often just like a band-aid, but it's important function. Allies to force your hero to make choices along the way. Like you can't have, read so many scripts where like the protagonist has no friends, no one to talk to, and no one in their life to make what they're doing seem like it means anything to them. The thing though is you want to artfully do these things. You don't want it to be just like, oh crap, let's give him a dying mom, or let's give them a best friend who literally has I remember I don't know if you know the Christmas Prince movies, Netflix.
Oh yeah.
They're very campy, Hallmark adjacent films, very bad. But the best friends of this girl are always calling her, and she never asks them a question about their lives. It's always, wow, and so what did you do? Did you go to, like, it's like they have like 4 scenes with these characters, and they're always on Zoom or in a coffee shop with her, and they're just like asking her about, are you going to date him? Oh, wow, your boss is she overworks you. She doesn't appreciate you enough, And I wonder if there's a way to make those relationships more interesting. Not in the Christmas Prince, obviously. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But I can't believe I'm talking about that movie.
You heard it here first, Adam.
I loved those movies. I thought they were really bad, but I loved them.
It's that time of year. You better pull them out. A question that I have about this, and they kind of do get into it, but is like, okay, so we all know that we don't want to have a best friend character who's flat and who like only exists to be there to like hype up the character or like hand them the thing they need or get their feelings out. But how do you make them a full person, or as they put it, 2 characters caught in each other's gravity, like 2 full characters, without it just kind of seeming like perfunctory? Like how do you do it like without it, like does it matter? So like if in Princess, in the Christmas Prince, would it have fixed it if when those people called her, they were like, oh my god, like, Billy, put that down. They're like, sorry, I'm just so busy right now. How are you doing? Would that have fixed it? Because now we've seen like a glimpse into their life. Or
no, those would have been cut because it wouldn't have advanced the story, right?
That's what I'm saying. So like, what is it? How do you fix it in a way that's not perfunctory or like performative?
Well, I think it comes down to designing the plot situation, to designing your movie in such a way where you don't have to come up with a band-aid, right? Like where the friends are more integrated into the castle or her life, right? Like where you had a friend journalist with her or something. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. I'm not here to fix Christmas Prince. Because part of it is the joy.
Yeah, that's the part we can't get. It does tie into something that they talk about later that we're not going to get into, which is like, not yet anyway, but briefly, it's like, instead of trying to fix your plot holes, like, instead of like trying to like fill them in, just like don't have them on your road, So it's like,
that's right. It's kind of like design it better, write it better,
write it better. So that you don't have to have them just calling in on voicemail and or on FaceTime and have it seem interesting.
But and it's okay to have a band-aid scene in your movie. I like, at the end of the day, like, it's not the end of the world. Just don't have 5,000 band-aids. Then they list a lot of it's just a great list of like, these are common types of ally bonds in movies. Sexual or romantic attraction between 2 characters. Distrust of maybe the coworker who, you're the cop you've been the buddy cop who hasn't earned the trust of the older one.
On this list, though, there is very clearly one relationship that is just like so much better and more interesting than any of the other ones. Just like from the way that it's written. Do you? I wonder if you agree with me.
Well, I'm going to list them really quickly. There's attraction, distrust, parent-child, shared history, sibling, marriage of convenience. I think that's the one.
That's pretty good, actually, but it's not the one I was thinking of. But once you read it, I said, oh, that one too.
Oh, I already read it?
No.
Parent-child? Oh, no. Misplaced faith, codependency, Animal loyalty. That's a weird one.
That's the
Rivalry.
good one.
Yeah, that
Continue.
is a good one. Yeah, that is. Mentorship, shared profession, mutual goal, debt. I think debt's an interesting one.
That is interesting.
Yeah, protector and protected is the most common. All those daddy-daughter stories like Last of Us.
Ooh, love it.
Revenge. Revenge is a good one too.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
the reason
you could
why
mix and
I
match
like
these.
the reason why I liked Marriage of Convenience and Animal Loyalty is because it kind of like has a
You like animal
problem.
loyalty.
I like Animal Loyalty because it has
Interesting.
like I just never thought of it like that.
Mm.
Like a lot of these, it's kind of like, oh, duh, parent, child,
Yeah, that is a
whatever,
good one.
duh, sibling. Animal loyalty, though,
Yeah.
and then they immediately were like, so like this guy is like an animal loyalty to his boss. Like they're talking about like the Godfather, but like the Godfather does not give two craps about him. And it was just like the fact that they call it animal loyalty just like has this like lizard brain, like deeply rooted implication that I think is really strong and interesting. And it's like I'm sure you could find a way to describe the other ones better,
So,
like that. But I was just like, dang, that one just stands out to me as like
so just from a shallow level, and I totally
yeah.
hear you. I had not thought of animal loyalty at all in that way because I don't have pets and probably never will. So it's not something I can relate to. But
Yeah.
don't want pets, don't want children. So common types of bonds. I think you can think of, okay, how can these different roles possibly fill out these functional questions, right? And you could think of interesting ideas of like, okay, I need to give my character somebody to talk to, and they have a mentorship or a rivalry, you know, or I need to expose different parts of my hero's background in a marriage of convenience relationship. Like that's the super like prescriptive and kind of cheap formula way of thinking about it. But if you're really stuck on this problem of God, I wrote this draft and my character doesn't talk to anybody, think about it's an interesting way of thinking about it. And like I said, bonds can be mixed and matched. This is more of a jumping off point than an exhaustive list. And also, as we keep going, I started getting less and less summaries of the and I even cut some of I cut the Game of Thrones guys because it was all just anecdotes about their life.
Yeah,
you know,
and I think that Craig really just wanted to publish the part where they said that Craig was taking credit for Game of Thrones. And like that Craig saved their
they could have found it because I mean honestly the part about the pilot was interesting, but
it was interesting. But basically, to give a quick summary, there was like this section about Game of Thrones, and it was like we sucked at the pilot. It was so bad. And then Craig came in and told us to fix it. And then it was so awesome. And that was like half of the interview that they chose to pull. I'm like, surely to God, they talked about craft a little more than that. But
and
maybe
this
not.
is the other reason we're going to skim over the celebrity guest stops.
Yeah.
Is that the actual Craig and John stuff is the meat of the book, and it's the most interesting. And if you want to learn the anecdotes and side stories of these great guests, read the book. Highly recommend. Go buy the book.
Some of them do have very good. Some of them are better than others. I just thought that the one with
this is a great example of underdeveloped best friend character. The Barb from Stranger Things. Remember, she died, and there was all that fan.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that it was funny because some of these quotes, some of them are really, really good. Some of the interviews have some really great nuggets. And then there was that one where it was just a plant so that we could hear that he fixed Game of Thrones. You know what? If I had fixed Game of Thrones, I'd probably put it in my book too.
Of course. I mean, it's the most popular television show in human history. So there you go. No, it was really good. First 4 seasons.
It was. The first 4 seasons were excellent. And
incredible. And then they ran out of books. Well,
and they wanted to move on. They ran out of interest, I think, is the main problem.
Well, no, but it was bad before then too. It was starting to it started falling off the moment George R. R. Martin wasn't a consultant on the show. And he was writing one episode of the series for the first 4 seasons and involved in the room.
Why did he stop?
Because he had to keep going back to writing. And they also, he said after the fact, after the show was all canceled or ended and everything, that they just stopped inviting him into conversations around season 4,
See,
and they
that's the
just started
problem.
doing their own thing. And
Yeah.
he is like, George R. R. Martin, say what you will about him, he's not a perfect writer, really talented at character and the
Yeah.
stuff of like, oh, would they do this if this happened? Like, he's so good at detail, and D&D, they are not. That's just not their strength,
So
and they
here's
need
what the
his
lesson
presence was
is.
really felt.
The lesson was never get too big for your britches, kids. If you got
That's
George R.
right.
R. Martin and you're doing a good job, don't assume don't assume that you can keep. Don't. It's not broke. It's not broke.
All right, we're
So
we're,
don't try
we're
to
gonna
fix
move
it.
on. We're gonna move on for the Game of
I'm
Thrones
writing my
stuff.
own screenplay book called "Don't Get Too Big for Your Britches,"
I love
and
it.
it's about not breaking, not fixing what ain't broke.
So the Lorene Scafaria section, and first of all, she's great, and her stuff's great. And the Friend of the Underworld's really great. She basically just talks about her experience breaking in and pitching, and how she felt, as a woman, kind of like being underestimated by directors, and her short height
Was she
being
the
just
one
as
who
much an
said?
impediment.
Yeah, was she the one who said the thing about like I will never? Oh yeah, basically that she's never going to pitch something that she cares about ever again. That she's just going to write it, and
Yeah,
like
which is a good point.
it is
Because
the point. That was my
because
highlight of this
and the
segment.
idea behind that, and then we'll move on. She basically felt like when you pitch somebody and you sell somebody on a pitch, they can build their preconceptions about what they think you pitched, and then when you actually write something that's different than what they imagined, your first draft is writing pushing against their assumptions about the script, which is annoying. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's move into chapter 5, which was really good. um, I didn't write that much apparently, but there's some really great notes. Conflict, you know, um, they have this list of 6 different types of conflict, which I thought were really smart. Like, and obviously, conflict is the core of all great screenwriting. You know, you need problems to happen. Lack of conflict is just boring to watch. Um, Character versus character, which is like in a scene, Bob is really going to just duke it out with Jerry, and they're just going to have a war of the words, and whoever comes out on top comes out on top. Internal
Or
struggle,
literal, yeah.
or right, literal. Internal conflict, which uses dialogue conduits with like those ally characters, or seeing a character react to a difficult situation. It's the problem with internal conflict is one of the best forms of conflict, but it's really hard to put on the screen, right? Like, oh God, I'm just so I don't know what to do. Should I tell him I had the affair or not? It will destroy my marriage, but the truth is the truth, and it's tearing me up, right? That's an internal conflict. Showing that, well, they need to have a friend they're talking to, which is what they mean by dialogue conduit. But it's a great form of conflict. Then there's struggle against circumstance, which is an external problem that's like visual on camera.
It's kind of like what people usually, because normally you talk about like character versus character versus like environment, or like character versus whatever. This is kind of like everything else external, right?
Yes.
Like it's like that's kind of how they're the things that you would learn in like middle school about what types of conflict there are. Everything except for character versus character goes in this bucket. It's like for whatever reason you are facing a circumstance which is making problems for you. It could be the environment, it could be your job, it could be like character versus God is one that comes up. It's anything external that's not another person.
Another form of conflict is avoiding another conflict, which is often they cite happening in the beginning of a rom-com. Like, I don't want to break up with him, so I'm going to find another way to get him to break up with me in a convoluted way, right? Like, avoiding a tough conversation is actually a form of it, creates more conflict because you have to go out of your way. And it's a lot of sitcoms and use this form of conflict. And then a really good one, which is just a lack of information. You're in Oz and you don't know what the hell's going on. And so many in Wizard of Oz, for example, Dorothy creates a lot of problems by just not knowing anything, right? Like she steps on the wrong thing and there's a reaction, or like, oh, you killed, like, she did the killing the witch's sister was not a lack of information, but her lack of information creates conflict. Her ignorance as a fish out of
Yeah.
water is a problem. And then there's just the classic dilemma. You've got two bad choices or two good choices. Which one do you take? And they're mutually exclusive. I think there are more types of conflict probably, but this is a good list of, like if you're thinking about, oh my God, my scene just is not working, nothing interesting is happening, and asking yourself the obvious question, what does my character want? What are they doing to get it? Isn't good enough. Think about, is this an internal conflict? Is this a struggle against circumstance? Is this two characters duking it out for moment of truth? Are they having a dilemma where they have to choose two things? I think this could be useful.
Yeah. So as someone who has worked with you, Adam, a lot on trying to like break down the way that we think about things, I found we've sat there for like hours and tried to think about like what are the different types, like what are the most important things, the core principles of a TV show, and like what are when I read this one of like the 6 types of conflict, first impression was that I really liked the way that some of it was informed. I love psychology stuff, and so the 4th point being avoiding a different conflict was really clever and was like a cool way of thinking about it. And then like thinking of dilemmas as like their own type of conflict, thinking about a lack of information as its own type of conflict. I found a lot of those things really interesting. However, having them grouped in this way really just like messed with my brain, because I'm looking at these things and I'm like, these are not the 6 types of conflict. Like half of these fit into each other. These are not the umbrellas that I would have chosen. But
this isn't a definitive, objective, positioned from objective importance list.
Because arguably a struggle against circumstance, a circumstance is a lack of information. So like
that's right.
Yeah. So like it was like I was just like my brain cannot handle the way that it's grouped.
I think a better way to frame this. That's why I said the first question you should ask yourself is, what does your character want? What is in their way to getting it? Like, what are they doing to get what they want? Like, that's a more possibly useful way of thinking about it.
And then, this is an interesting point, Orlando. It was definitely one that crossed my mind too. The idea that a lack of information counts as conflict was a little bit.
The way they talked about it, the way it works in my head is if you're doing something actively to avoid the conflict, it works, right? For example, like, okay, I'm not going to tell Craig I don't love him anymore, so I'm going to get him to break up with me before I break up with him. So I'm going to manufacture this convoluted situation for him to break up with me so I don't have to have a hard conversation. That is active, right? But it's not enough to just, I'm not going to have the conversation.
But like the lack of information in particular is pretty passive. Like just like not having the information. Again, though, that's more like struggle against circumstances. It's like,
well, but it's like, okay, it's like where does the problem of the scene start? And then what do they do to get overcome it, right?
I will say one type of conflict that they did not include, which is my least favorite type of conflict, is lack of communication. I feel like that is like the type of
Isn't that a lack of information?
I feel like it's like I feel like this is a bad type of conflict, is like lack of communication. It's like, I find it very frustrating to watch something where the conflict is a lack of communication. Like where if everybody could just talk in the same room, we could resolve this. I find that very frustrating as a viewer. And that, it kind of does feel like lack of information. It's like, is that a good...
I disagree though. I think sometimes it can be really great, especially in period pieces.
I hate it.
No. Wait, I agree. There's a bad version and there's a good bad version.
Yeah.
The bad version where you're like, God, this whole movie wouldn't have happened if those two just had a conversation. That's the bad version.
Yeah.
The good version is somebody makes a choice based on flawed information. Yeah. And two people had different impressions of a conversation, and that leads to a sequence of events that's like, a great example, I think, is actually from Game of Thrones, is Melisandre misinterprets the prophecy, which is why she thinks it's Stannis is the prophesized god, right? She could have had, like, if she was in the room with some people who lived in the north, she would have had a better reading of that information, right? Like shows there was a conversation that she would have never been able to be a part of, and her ignorance of that caused, her actions for books and books and books.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good version of this, where sort of like, I like when people don't know that they have flawed versions of the truth, and then they make
Yeah.
bad choices because of that.
The thing that I don't like is like when you're watching a TV show and like you find out that someone is secretly someone like is like related to like this is secretly my father. But then instead of just like dealing with it, we keep it like tucked away as like a secret. You don't like let it like the ripple effects happen. It's just kind of like I'm gonna withhold this. I'm gonna keep it to myself.
Oh, so it's when a character learns something and then they
Yeah.
don't share it.
Yeah, and so then it's just like we're
That makes
all
sense.
kind of it's sort of like when are you going to rip that band-aid off and just like let people react to this information?
Yeah,
But
that
now
makes
I'm
sense.
going on a tangent
So let's
because
go to
yeah,
one of the best chapters I thought in the book was
Yeah.
dialogue and exposition.
agreed.
This was a really meaty chapter, or at least I thought so. Because look at all the stuff I read. They basically start off by saying, "Hey, this is the part where it's talent and we can't teach you." But then they go into a lot of really useful problem solving to make stuff better. So
Yeah, that was a little negative of them right at the beginning. It was sort of like
I do agree. I do
they
agree.
said,
There is kind of
here's
a
the
part of
line
it.
that was pretty brutal. Are you ready? Can I share the brutal
Yeah,
line?
sure.
In our experience, writers who struggle with dialogue rarely improve that much.
I
Caddy!
I know one or two people who
Caddy.
have gotten better, but I do agree that when
It's just so
it's
catty.
so much easier, to teach or to learn plot and scene construction.
Yeah.
But if you just don't have an ear for how people talk, that is harder to teach and learn, I will say.
It is. I just read it and I was like, oh, wow.
But
if
then
you
they go
suck,
into some
sorry.
great advice. So we're going to skip over that.
Yeah.
I liked this idea of great dialogue is less of competition between two characters and more characters working together to build something. Because I do think that it's taught all scenes are conflict. All dialogue is people fighting. That's an initial false impression new writers get when they're told all scenes are conflict, and they're like, wait, I don't want all my characters to be fighting all the time. No, that's a misunderstanding of conflict and interaction between characters. It is more of a building off of a chemistry, a reactive quality. But they talk about, dialogue is messy. And the way realistic dialogue, the way people actually speak, people don't speak clearly. They speak in non sequiturs. They lose their train of thought. They say something complex with simple words. They use simple words for something complex. There's so much variation in how actual speech happens. And actual movie dialogue is an optimization of real speech. It's a synthesized version of it. So it takes the appearance of how people really talk. At the end of the day, it's dense, it's layered with meaning, it's different. They have a lot of, but the good stuff right here, unless you don't want to speak about it right now, is thinking about, obviously the advice we all hear is that every character voice should be distinct and that you should be able to tell difference between the different characters if you cover their names. Or, for example, you give a line from one character and then you give it to another character, it shouldn't fit, right? Every character's dialogue should feel like something that would come from them uniquely. Like if you have a character who has a high vocabulary, there's a character who has a limited vocabulary, a character who comes from a certain background or likes to use certain types of words, you should make your characters sound different from each other. So when, their personalities feel different on the page. He had a point, which is if you're imagining a specific actor for your characters, if you can imagine both Christopher Walken and Tom Hanks for the same character part, something is wrong, right? There should be just something innate in the words that has difference. You should really take that seriously in how your characters express themselves and speak. But this is an interesting idea of people speak in different modes. And I was thinking when I was reading this about how do I speak differently to different people in different situations? Yeah. There's neutral Adam speak, right? Where I'm exactly code switching, where I'm ordering a coffee, where I give, and then there's emotional speak where it's lizard brain Adam and ordering a coffee Adam are two very different, states of being. And there's declarative Adam, which is who you're listening to right now. Um, and then manipulative Adam, which is always who you're talking to. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But like neutral, emotional, declarative, manipulative. I
They
wonder if
left
there are
off
more
one.
states. Yeah,
They
would they
left
leave?
off one. It's phone voice. The voice that you use
Mm,
on the phone.
isn't that declarative?
I don't know because it's different. I feel
It's,
like when I'm
it's a
talking and
subtype
I'm
of declarative.
it's like but it's like when I answer the phone and it's so hard not to make like your voice go like for me as a woman, it's very hard for me not to like have my voice go up an octave. It's like, "Hello? Oh
Oh,
yeah, hi.
interesting.
Yeah, this is me." And then like for Carl, when he answers the phone, he's like, "This is Carl." I'm like, "Oh my
Oh,
god,
interesting.
what are you doing?" It's like I
My
don't know what
phone
it is.
voice is more is what I call antidepressant Adam. He's like, "Hey, how you
Hi.
doing?"
Yeah, see, it's phone voice.
Yeah, yeah. So phone voice is different, but
Yeah,
I think regardless,
yeah,
the thing to take away is less these specific subcategories, and but to think more about your characters. I think so many writers make the two mistakes. One, they make all their characters speak like a version of themselves, typically a witty kind of like this is the truth and I'm going to tell you how it is, or I'm snarky and reactive, like
yeah,
this is bad obviously. Or they have their character just be one type.
yeah,
And I think thinking about your characters as different people from yourself or different aspects of yourself, and having different states that are context driven. Like, how does your protagonist talk when they're lizard brain mode and they're just like really upset? And how do they talk when they're trying to communicate or they're like teaching a class? Having the language be suited to situation and the
yeah.
emotional state of the character, I think that's a really great way of thinking about it.
I figured it out. Phone speak is manipulative.
Never go so. Oh, you're so right. Never go full Sorkin. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, and something that they brought up though that I thought was a good point, which is like as a writer, we have this inclination to when a
Mm.
character is extremely emotional, that's when they give their big speech and it's super eloquent and they like they
Yeah, they're beautiful
they
speech
talk
makers.
yeah, yeah, they suddenly are like able to articulate everything in like this really gorgeous way that sums everything up. But in real life, when you're having an emotional moment, you become a hot, inarticulate mess.
Right.
It's like,
Lizard brain. Think about. I think this is a good writing hack. If your
yeah,
character is in an emotional, high key moment, they're lizard brain. They aren't
yeah.
declarative.
Again, I love that because it's psychology. So, like, lizard brain is literally like the lower function of your brain in which you
Mm-hmm.
don't have time to check back in with your experiences and your memories.
Your
So
frontal lobe.
basically, yeah. So you basically like so it's just your amygdala, which is
That's
like
right.
emotions and stuff, and not your hippocampus. So you are basically
The
in
frontal lobe. Yeah.
yeah. So basically you're in fight or flight. Like you're purely thinking about like how do I survive this? Like how do I get through this moment? Not necessarily like you're not necessarily able to do the manipulative thing if you're truly in like a real emotional state. And so it's kind of interesting because that's when you'll get people maybe blurting out what they really feel so you can still like have that speech moment, but it's probably not going to be articulating it in like the most beautiful way. So it could be
Yeah.
like it could be somebody really upset and being like, I love you. Like, okay, yeah, I love you, but it's probably not going to be ever since I first laid eyes on you. Like, as they're dying. That was me dying
Sure.
as the
Sure.
coughing, like it's probably not going to be a big speech unless you're
Uh,
Carl. And
something
then
I was
you
thinking of
will
because
get
I was
it.
just watching Succession the other day. The characters are all manipulative all the time, but sometimes they're manipulative and declarative. Sometimes they're manipulative and emotional.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're manipulative and neutral, but they are always trying to one up and get their point across and like get their like position themselves.
Although
Always.
Except for Kendall is sometimes just emotional, and I think that's why he fit.
Sometimes
Yeah,
he is, but his
yeah,
version of manipulative is just bad. Like
yeah. That's true.
he's just an idiot.
That's
He's trying. Like he's always
that's true.
trying,
That's true.
but
You're right. Yeah, he is. Sometimes it is just emotional, but he's still like desperately clinging, trying to be manipulative, as his lizard brain is just like spiraling
yeah.
out of control. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, another idea of this is like great scenes often involve characters with mismatched modes. If someone's declarative and someone else is neutral, or someone is neutral in a highly emotional situation.
Yeah.
Like you can think that it's just a great way of thinking like, oh, if your scene's a little stale, just do a check on like, where is my protagonist head at? How are they expressing themselves? Again, this kind of goes back to the end of the day, what you're actually going to get away as a writer is the good questions. And this is just a good question to ask yourself is how are they presenting? What is their
Yeah.
voice right now? Um, and I
And
think
like,
so
what
many
if,
people just don't have an awareness of these things.
well, and honestly, the Kendall thing, and this made me think about the fact that a lot of times there can be a mismatch not between two different people but like internally and externally. Like internally I'm emotional but I am trying to be declarative or I'm trying to
Mm,
be neutral, and I think that that creates something interesting. Like it, like, so the mismatch can be within one person. um and so like I think that that's kind of what they were saying is like one character is strangely neutral in a highly charged situation. That mismatch could be internal, or it could be like, it could be that they like are shutting down because they're trying not to be emotional, or it could be because of something else with the plot, like they always knew that this was going to happen,
mm.
sinister, you know. But basically yeah, that it can be within one person, these mismatches.
And then they also have this really good nugget, which is consider how each character would tell a joke.
Hmm.
Because even if you're not writing a comedy, it's worth thinking about how a given character can be funny and in what way they're funny. And I thought that was just such a golden nugget because I sometimes you don't think of a certain character as like, okay, if they were to be funny, what would that, how would they what would their sense of humor be? Like that's such a
That's so
great thing
good
to think about.
because, well, because also I think that a lot of times as writers, like you write these characters who are like, who you just think could never be funny. Like they're just a jerk. They are just like the father in Succession. Like, oh,
Mm,
like a lesser writer would be like, this man will never be funny. He is always just like dominating the room, and like he's, you know, he's always intense, he's never these things. But then I think that the truth is, though, is that something that they point out is that everybody likes to be funny sometimes. Like everybody's
of course.
amused by something sometimes. And so it's just, it might be that his sense of humor is like he finds it funny when he can like make his kid like flounder a little bit, you know, like when he can, like he might find it funny when he has secretly undercut everybody and decided, no, I'm going to stay on. Part of him might be amused by that. And so I think that it's a really interesting thing to think about, like even these big bad characters that you think would never tell a joke, they're still going to be amused by things. It just might be something that points to like how sick and twisted they are.
I also think this is a great way of going back to an earlier idea they were sharing of like, okay, you need every scene to have reveal character and move the plot forward.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're in an action scene and they're in the elevator diffusing the bomb, have one character like try to be funny, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's a character moment, right? Like thinking about like, okay, how can I actually on a human level, beyond just getting from point A to point B, have like these people showing us who they really are. And something there's something great about a joke falling flat that I just love.
Yeah.
Um,
You just
it's
like
funnier
watching people
often than the
suffer.
intended joke.
Yeah.
We all do. We all do.
Yeah.
I mean, we all do. It's
No,
true.
we
Even
do.
if
We,
like,
I mean, that's why we watch movies, right?
yeah,
We
that's right.
hope that
That's right.
it'll get better usually, but we do.
They also come out really heavy-handed against dual dialogue, which I thought was interesting. And I think
Yeah.
they have a point. They have a point. It's like seasoning. Don't use it too much. I think there are a lot of situations where, like, yeah, naturally the actors will just talk over each other a little bit, you know, and you
They
can
were
maybe
pretty
have it
like,
in the
yeah.
parenthetic.
Yeah, that was a pretty brutal one. But then they did include a quote from Greta Gerwig where she talks about how
Yes,
the she
the
steals the
forward
technique
dash.
from, yeah, the dash from playwriting, which basically what she does, just a quick summary of what she does, is that in her dialogue, when she wants it to overlap, she includes a slash when the other character is supposed to come in. And she was also saying that she does not like actors deviating from her script at all because she's really considering the rhythm. And so, like, when she says you need to start your line here in the middle of what they're saying, she's like really thought this through, kind of like a musician. And so I thought that that was interesting that they included that after being like, don't do it.
But the thing I liked about that, and I've come, Carol Churchill is a famous playwright, a English playwright from the 70s and 80s, and she still works today, actually. She's very, very popular. She invented that type of dash as an interruption between characters, and it's now kind of like a standard of playwriting. It's what's great about it is that it controls where the overlap happens exactly, and I think that's great.
I love it.
So look
I didn't know that.
It's great.
I'm looking it up right now, and I love it already. I love it so much more now.
It's great. So,
this advice. The next one, though, we have to. I know that this chapter is so loaded, but I loved this about like how help your characters listen actively.
Yes.
And so basically, it's like something that they talked about too is that when they do the 3-page challenge, a lot of times the feedback that they give people is like, this is essentially a monologue where you just have other people kind of coming in so that it's not a monologue. Like where people say like, oh, really? No way. Tell me more. And basically that you don't, that one way that you can make sure that you are, actually having your character participating, like the other character participating in the scene and not just something that's a secret monologue, is by having your character listen actively. And one thing that you can ask yourself to do that, because it's all about good questions, is ask, why are they listening? So like if a character is giving a monologue, why is my character listening? And it's like, why are they listening to this at all? What exactly are they hoping to hear? Are they coming up with their counterpoint as they're hearing them talk? Like, are they listening for something to be wrong? Are they listening for what they need to do? Like, what exactly why is your character actively engaged in this? And so you're like helping them be active even in a listening role. So I really liked that. Like, asking why are they listening is a good little tip.
Well, okay. Sorry, I just got a bunch of messages and I was got sidetracked for a second.
You are all good.
Focusing on the live stream that I'm on.
I said, why are they listening?
I know. Why are they listening? Yeah, that was great. Audit of every scene. Let's talk about exposition. They kind of come in the defense of exposition a little bit. It's kind of like one of the things that we're like, it's actually really important when it's done well. It gets a bad rap because it's done so badly. Exposition is information the audience needs to know. And often it gets a bad rap when characters they do a list of, as you and I both know, we've been brothers for 10 years, or 20 years, since you married into the family. Or like, it's like, why are you telling us things that both of you should already know? Yeah. Or, as your sister, I need to tell you to establish what the family relationship is.
Hey, bro, one of the things I hate the most is, hey, sis, can you give me this?
Yeah. The other version is like people saying each other's names way too much. Like, so, John, like
okay, but I found that a lot of boys like to do that on Instagram so much. Like if I'm talking to someone and it always throws me off so much. I find that like it must be like a trend that people like now message me. They're like, hey, Alexie, how are you doing, Alexie?
I don't think I've ever used your name.
So much, Alexie. Thank God.
Except when I introduce you on a stream.
It's so jarring to me every single time, but people love to do it. Like they're like, you know what, Alexie? That's great, Alexie. I'm like, holy crap.
Subcultures change, whatever. It's historically seen as kind of a kludgy way of, we, the writer, need you to know that this guy's name is John.
Yeah.
So his best friend is going to say, hey, John, how's it going? Oh, great, Michael. It's cloying to our ears because it's so obviously the writer's hand. And the thing about great exposition is it needs to feel invisible. And there are a few really great ways of getting past that. We've talked about this for years. One that they didn't talk about which is attacking with exposition. Make the news bad news for the characters. I love this. Like, it's a great way of centering it. But let's talk about the things that they do list, which is make the questions in the scene something that they would organically ask in the situation. The example they use is Jurassic Park. They're on that little intro ride, which is something the characters would do if you were on a theme park with dinosaurs, and there would be a little introductory area or a little video that plays explaining where you are and how this happened.
The classic, like when they include the little training video and stuff, they did that in like Loki and things.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, that's a great way, because the characters would watch that if they were in that situation. And it's based on this truth of like, you want the information that the characters are sharing to also be information that the characters need. Like another example they use is the Neo in the Matrix. Spoilers for the Matrix, came out 30 years ago. When he finds out that he was living his whole life in a simulation, and Morpheus sits down and says, "Listen, kid, this is how the world works, and this is when the machines took over, yada, yada, yada." He desperately needs this information. And so when the audience, but if he already knew this, if he was already an insider to the world, it would be cloyingly annoying me. Like, why is he explaining this? They should already know this. He doesn't know. He's a newcomer. So the audience learning along with the character is a great way.
As you and I both know, Harry, you're a wizard.
Yes. Right. Harry doesn't know. And Harry discovered with us. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Exactly. Let's go quickly through Greta Gerwig. I wrote a lot down because it was good, but
we learned about the slashes, the Carol Churchill dash.
Yes. Getting specific control over crosstalk, that's really useful. But I also just thought it was interesting because she came out of improvisational movies, which is a genre called mumblecore, which was really popular in like around 2006 to 2012. It was all these films that were made without screenplays, and the actors were like writing the movies with the directors as they were going along. That's how she kind of got her start as an actor. And she was saying she actually missed having a screenplay because psychologically, if you are the character, you're going to make decisions that protect low conflict decisions in the scene. And when you have the text set and it's like emotionally difficult, you'll rise to conflict. Whereas if you're improvising, you're less likely to say the most damaging, horrible thing. And that she kind of missed that about screenplays, and that screenplays can be like a challenge for actors. I thought that was really one of the most interesting things. This is probably my favorite of the guest spots so far. Yeah, do you have anything else?
And I also liked that, she was talking about how she wants to treat her screenplays basically like the final product, because that could be all it is. And so like, it's not just a blueprint to her. So not just treating it as a means to an end, but as an end in and of itself, because that's how most screenplays will end up. So like actually writing it as something to be enjoyed on its own, and kind of like wishing that more people would read screenplays like that, like just read them in the same way that people are more willing to just like read plays,
That's such a writer thing to say, of course. No, I did like that line of if she can will it into existence, if it exists with excellence on the page. I really liked that. Okay, let's talk about point of view. We're on the end stretch of the first 9 chapters that we're covering here. When I was taught screenwriting, I was kind of taught that point of view is something prose writers have to think about. And I think I was falsely led there about 12 years ago when I was learning, or longer than that, actually, when I was first reading screenplay books. I'm old Gandalf. The way they define point of view in this context of screenwriting is it's which characters in a story have the ability to drive the scene. And some stories have a singular point of view, like Harry Potter's example. There isn't a single chapter or scene in any Harry Potter movie where Harry isn't the center focus of the scene, with some notable exceptions, but like the vast majority of it, 99% of it, is that the titular character, the protagonist hero, and main character are the one whose their eyes are the camera's eyes. Their action is the action that pushes forward the scene. And then there are stories that have a way broader point of view, where you could have a scene with this character and then have a scene with this character, and each of those scenes, well, it's there where the camera is kind of noticing the things they notice.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, because when you're thinking about, actually, the first way this was presented to me was, whose scene is this?
Yeah.
Early on. And I think that's a really good question to ask yourself. They don't say it that way, but I do think, like, when you're having a scene, maybe especially in a television show, maybe where you're like, whose scene is this? Whose action is fundamental to the scene? Most of the time, it's your protagonist. But if it's a television show where, maybe you have like a lot of characters or a lot of character point of views, and 2 point of view characters in the same scene, you have to make a choice about whose scene is this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that something that they said that I thought was interesting is that, in general, as a general rule, when you give somebody a point of view, like a scene in their point of view, you're elevating that character, and suddenly we expect something from them. It's sort of like you're making a promise to your audience of, this is going to matter and pay attention to them, and that it can feel like a loose end if you never circle back. And so one example they gave was in Jurassic Park, when they kill that guy. Basically, like, they used him as a point of view, and then in order to not have to keep doing that, they killed him. And I thought that was, good. One thing that I think of, though, as like an exception to this, and they did say that there were exceptions, but they didn't give an example, is like when you switch a point of view for a joke. So, like, say you're seeing 2 superheroes fighting horror, like in the sky, like bow, 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 bow. And then all of a sudden you cut to the classic thing now. It's like the janitor rocking out to music, like mopping the floor. And then you see the superheroes bust in through the back, and they're like fighting in the background, and then they fly off. And then the janitor does like a double take and is like, oh my God, look how much I have to clean. And then we cut back to what they were doing. That's sort of one of those places, like, where you're like thinking about, whose point of view am I in for this scene, and who's the most interesting one? But I think little things like that are good for a joke. But in general, when you're really choosing to represent someone's point of view, they suddenly become someone that's elevated in our mind.
And something they add, which I thought was very useful, was, from the audience's point of view, how do they decide whose eyes they're seeing out of? Often they're looking for the first character they see in a scene, the first character who speaks in a scene, the character who's spoken the most in the scene, characters asking the most questions, or the character who disrupts the equilibrium of the scene. And then finally, I would say, whose eyes are tied to the camera the most.
Yeah, I think so. It's sort of like, and something that they talked about is that, for example, if you're going to have a scene like between like a principal and a kid, are you going to start with the kid waiting outside before they go in, or are you going to start with the principal, like, emotionally preparing and like going through like the reports and stuff, and sort of just like choosing? That's sort of the thing of like the character that we see first. Who do we see sort of like anticipating this moment? And that completely changes the way that you interpret who you sympathize with in a scene.
A really great example from this last year, the film Weapons, which is a horror film. I know you've probably seen it, Alexie, but really fantastic use of point of view, where the way they structure it, they have about 5 to 6 point of view characters, and they segment it into the different characters, like Barb, William, like their names, and you see the same events from different character point of views. So like you see the day, and then they play loose, and it's not like the same day, but it's like you'll pick up from, and now we're in the cop's point of view. Now we're in the school teacher's point of view, but they don't cut in between. They'll do like a 20-minute stretch where they're just in one character's point of view, and then they pick up from another 20 minutes just where they're in their point of view. And we even see their name on the screen. It's like a novelistic convention. And it's a really cool way of controlling the flow of information to create suspense. And I'd never really seen that done in a movie, a genre film like that. It was really well done. It was really good.
That's cool.
Highly recommend it if you're up for a horror movie. But the first half was scared me the crap out of me, and the second half was really funny. Which was
interesting.
Yeah, highly recommend it.
I'll check it out.
But Yeah, and then again, these just comes down to what the masterclass journeyman writer thing that you're actually going to take away from these books when you read a screenwriting book is to ask the better questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting point of view for the scene, right? Like, that's a good question. That's a more useful question than who am I supposed to identify with the group. That's an audience question, right? That's an implicit. You have to understand that people are asking that question, but the actual advanced concept to ask yourself is the choice of who is the scene about and making that interesting. Don't just do it, oh, it's Bob's point of view because it's been Bob's point of view. If you've made a design decision that you're switching points of view, ask yourself, like, who's the most interesting person to see from this scene?
That's always been something that's been kind of challenging for me, is thinking about, like, when is it acceptable and how do you make it acceptable to kind of jump to, like, the bad guy's point of view. And so, like, one version is that, like, you know, if you don't want to have to keep cutting back and forth, you do that scene at the beginning of, like, the criminal TV show, like, where we're with the serial killer for the first opening scene, the cold open, and then now you're with the detectives for most of it.
Right.
And then sometimes you keep jumping back to, like, the current victim who's going to be saved eventually. But, like, for, you know, like, you kind of, like, establish it early on. But sometimes it can be challenging to decide when it's okay to jump.
Well, I think the best way to think about it is at the beginning, and to make a core design decision about what this movie is going to be and how it's going to feel. And I think a great example they cite is Gone Girl and Psycho. Psycho and Gone Girl, they don't talk about Psycho, but both movies have first half of the movies in one point of view, and then the second half of the movies in a completely different point of view.
Oh, Promising Young Woman did something interesting with perspective.
That's right. You're completely right. Yeah. Not to spoil any of these movies, but
they're old now.
You know. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Psycho's old. The girl dies halfway through, okay? And then you're in the killer's point of view for the second half of the movie. It's interesting.
Act 3 of Promising Young Woman is a different point of view, which is interesting. And now, speaking of questions to ask yourself.
These are some great questions.
How to write a scene, chapter 8.
Yeah. This is great. And I really liked how they articulated this, because, like, this is how you know the difference between actual writers and, like, people who just talk about writing from a descriptive point of view. Robert McKee, as great as I liked his book, but, you know, come on. Writing scenes is just an instinctive thing. The more you write, the less you actually think about scene structure, unless something's wrong or you're planning something. You know, for me, I have my little diagram I start off with of, like, want to get, but I don't actually ask myself that every single time. You know, like, it's an editorial.
At some point, it becomes second nature. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just writing scenes, and they acknowledge it. Like, you know, it's kind of like riding a bike. You just sort of do it. That's why I think so many writers focus on macro structure and they don't focus on, like, microstructure, unless something's wrong or you're trying to fix something. But they ask themselves, but you need to ask yourself good questions when things are going wrong, or before, when you're deciding what you want your story to be about,
or when you're first learning how to write a scene.
Yeah, what needs to happen in the scene is a great question. And they have this interesting idea of, like, don't focus on what characters want, focus on what you want, because you're the writer. I thought that was an interesting thing, but they're because they say most characters would choose to avoid conflict in the first place, and I think that's actually a great point. Like, you need to think about why the character is doing this is a better question, right? Than what do they want to happen? Well, they want to live in a happy. They want to avoid.
They want to walk up to the bad guy and they hand them the detonator and say, "You know what? I changed my mind." Yeah.
Yeah. What needs to happen is a more important question, but what needs to happen in this scene? What's the worst thing that would happen if the scene was cut? That was an interesting question.
Yeah, they said, like, what if your protagonist just didn't show up that day? What would happen?
Yeah, right. What if Superman was asleep, you know, when the meteorite hit?
Yeah. And this was sort of a litmus test for making sure that the scene should be in the movie. What would be the worst thing that would happen if this got cut?
Who needs to be in the scene? That's a good question sometimes, because sometimes, you know, you could have a character who doesn't say anything in the scene because they don't actually need to be in the scene. It's kind of weird that then you have them just standing around doing nothing. Where could this scene take place? And they give an example of a father-son bonding scene at a slaughterhouse plays very differently than in a bowling tournament. I thought that was a great example of being like, oh, you know, actually, like, think about, like, where setting is important. Like, and I fall into this so often. I'm so lazy with, interior apartment day. Like, sometimes you gotta push beyond the first instinct. Like, think about where is this specifically and how is that interesting?
Yeah, you got to think about. I really got to rack that budget up. Gotta make this expensive. Where else should I put it?
Unless you're writing something that's where the design principle of the film is it's locked into one location.
Yeah.
And from there, like, you don't have to think about these things, or you thought about them before. What's the most surprising thing that could happen in the scene? It's a great question to ask yourself. Is this a long scene or a short scene? How much screen time, basically, is the question, right?
It's wild, too, that they were like, this could be a monster 3-page scene. And I remember when I first started writing, it was like the average scene is 2.5 pages. And like now they're like a mega hulk of a scene, 3 whole pages.
Well, have they ever read a Paul Thomas Anderson script?
Yeah, true.
He's got like 7-page, 8-page scenes. Brainstorm 3 ways the scene could begin with. That's a good exercise, I think, because like so often we hear the get in late, get out early. But sometimes we don't think of what's the most interesting way to get in late. We think of the first thing, and sometimes there's the second thing you think of is better. And then play it on the screen in your head. That's a good one, but some people don't have the ability to because they.
I realized that have I ever talked to you about this? I realized that I don't have it like I thought I had it.
Oh yeah.
Like I can't visualize things the way that I thought that I could. Like when I try to.
How did you think you could, and how can you actually visualize?
Because like I imagine things in my head, but I realized it's not really with like solid pictures in the way that some people can.
It's like a sketch outline.
Yeah, it's like very like moving, like ethereal, foggy. Like I can kind of like sense it, but I can like hear the dialogue, and that's more what I can do and like get like the vibe. But I realized that like I can't picture people's faces in my head like at all. Like I can't picture like if I
like even if you tried.
Yeah, like even if I tried, I can't picture.
Like if you imagine Peter Dinklage's face for a second,
I can like it's like I have like the overall thing, but if I sat here and tried to describe it to you, I could be like, his hair is curly. But like if I ever, God forbid, if I ever witness a crime and I had to go to a sketch artist, I would not like I could not describe your face to a sketch artist. Like I can't hold it in my head in that way.
Interesting.
It's very
people's brains.
Yeah, but I can still like do the scene, but it's just anyway, learn something about myself today.
This is the best advice of the 10, I think, is to write a scribble version of the scene. It's
so much cuter than your vomit draft. Scribble version over vomit draft.
Vomit is dead. Scribble is in. It's and he has an example of just like it's really rudimentary, and he says like you should be able to take no more than 5 minutes. I was like, yeah, that's right. Just get like a version of it, like, and even if it's like mixed, it could be with just bad dialogue. It could be with just narrative description with little smatterings of dialogue. Just getting a version of A to B. And he said he used to handwrite it. Now he types really fast.
I thought it was funny how brutal the scene was, that he was like, oh, I'll just give you a little taste of my scene. It's like, the child is dead. My wife wasn't pregnant. right. I was like, oh my God.
And you'll have to read the book to see the scribble scene they talked about, but he has a little screenshot of example. And it's great.
Trauma team, sorry, couldn't save her.
When I write, when I handwrite scribble, my version of the scribble version, I don't write character names. I just write the dialogue.
And that's how this one is too. Like he wrote the name one time, and then it was just done.
Yeah, and then the last one is a cop out because it's basically just write the scene. And this feels like a blog from 2007, which is what it is. So this is not. I was not a big fan of these. I mean, some of these are good, but it's like these aren't actually questions you're going to ask yourself for the most part, other than what needs to happen or what's the worst thing that would happen.
I liked the word scribble. It's going to replace vomit in my mind, and I'm forever grateful. And that's my main takeaway.
So let's go to world building. They had
the last
an interesting
chapter that we're doing this time.
That's right. And Chapter 10 is, I think, one of my favorite chapters in the book, though. So you'll have to see the second live stream or read the book yourself or decide
No, we
you
read it
want to
for
know.
you.
Yeah, right. I thought it was their view of world building aligns with my world view of it, which was very much like it's actually concrete to the specifics of what do you need to write this script. And when you write interior, exterior, day or night, or their examples of exterior suburban house, that's misspelled. Jesus Christ. I think. Is that how you?
Cerberin. No, it says
Suburban.
Cerberin.
Okay, let's keep it. So, exterior Cerberin house.
It's a last name now.
Yeah, there you go.
Cerberin.
There you go. Exterior suburban house. See, when things are.
It still doesn't say it. That's okay.
Yeah, whatever. When things are in caps, I can't spell.
Yeah.
That's why I need auto.
So I like slightly have aphantasia, and you have slightly have some.
Oh yeah, I make spelling mistakes all the time. It's actually. Yeah, look at this. Essential.
Essential. You've like made up a different. If you could be like Tolkien and like make a whole different language, it's just things that you've misspelled.
I don't have time. That man had 40 years to write 3 books. Actually, no, he wrote tens of thousands of words that were like eventually compiled into 14 books and they were all written in pencil in a font that was impossible to read. Like
on purpose.
So, yeah, on purpose, because you don't want people. No, we don't know. Okay, world building, the actual act of sentence by sentence. Where does this scene need to take place? Where does this actually need to live? What do you need to understand about this world? And I think that they have a good way of describing. I've heard it described better, honestly, but like the idea of every world needs to exist. Or I should say, every screenplay needs a setting that reflects conflict and reflects the world you need to tell it. Whereas like you're building a story in New York. Well, okay, which New York? What type of New York? Is this Brooklyn in the 70s? Is this Jewish Brooklyn, New York in the 70s? Is this Black New York in the 70s? Like which culture? Like where are we sitting? What don't we see? Where do we like that? Those are all parts of setting and world building, and making conscious choices about that. A lot of types of writers don't think very deeply about setting. Some writers, like Alexie, I know you get really excited about setting. You love to expand setting, right? But the thing is, from the screenwriter's point of view, you're writing scenes. You're writing scenes with characters. You need to build enough for there to be interesting scenes with characters and a story to be told. And when you choose exterior suburban house night, that is a choice in world building. I liked that they introduced it that way, because it is true. When you choose the scene heading, you are making a choice about setting. And I think a lot of people don't think hard enough about scene heading. They don't think enough about the details of a place. It's an essential ingredient. The geography of a scene is important. And how did you digest this?
No, I liked it a lot, and it reminded me a lot of, because again, when we were working on writing the pilot, we sat there and we talked about all these things so much, trying to like reverse engineer kind of how good stories do it. And something that they said that aligns with what we said, which makes me feel smart, is basically treating it like a character. It's like, if this was a character, what would are they warm and inviting? Are they cold and foreboding? Like, what kind of character is your setting? And then also the idea that basically your world only exists where your character touches, right? So it's like, I don't necessarily need to know how the mail works in like my moon world, right? Like, I don't need to know how the like if they have a mail system like the Pony Express, or if they have like modern day USPS. I don't need to know that necessarily until my character for some reason needs to go intercept a letter. Then now I need to know how the mail system works on my planet. And so it's like, basically their advice was, you only need to know as much as we can see. It's sort of like building those like facades of like those like Western movies, like where we only need to see the front of the buildings because our characters are never going to go behind them. So it was an interesting thing. Like, I liked that they said treat him like a character. I personally like to build the whole thing. So I don't love the advice of like only build the mail system when you need to know about the mail system. But also maybe that's something that I could do better, or maybe that's an obstacle I put in my own way in some ways.
One way to I think that the counter argument I would hear is like I don't think there's a difference between the end result of what we digest and what you think about to get there, right?
Yeah.
And I think there is something to be said for using what you need when to write it. But in retrospect, when you think about it, like, what is Aragorn's tax policy? Like,
yeah.
In the Game of Thrones version of Lord of the Rings, that would actually be an important question. In the story Lord of the Rings is trying to tell, that's actually not important. We don't need to know. I think it's, it's like, and he ruled for 100 years and was a good king. Yeah, but like, what did they do with the rest of those orcs who ran into the hills? Did they do a genocide? What was the policy?
What does that mean? Good king?
Yeah, exactly. There are things you can put. I think Middle Earth is one of the most detailed worlds ever built, but there are questions he dramatically was not interested in.
Yeah.
And there are things just because we're talking about Game of Thrones a lot, the Song of Ice and Fire, there's a lot of detail in like the tax policy and some questions, but there's some mistakes. Like, for example, there are only 3 noble titles. You can be a knight, a lord, or a king, basically. And in real medieval Europe, there were barons, there were counts, there were like a lot of detail in an actual feudal system.
Yeah.
But if he actually wrote all the detail, it would be interesting. He wrote what he needed to make a world, and was smart enough to focus on the dramatically interesting world building. Focus on the tax policy when it was important to realize, okay, bank fraud is happening. And I think the most interesting thing about his world building, or all good world building, is knowing what the fun of the story is and building depth where that focus is. And then kind of doing illusions on the wall with the rest of it. And I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to build a whole world. And they don't really think about what's the fun of the story. What's the point of view of the story? Where are we focusing on characters? And I think a lot of people who come from D&D world building, which is my least favorite type of world building, is very much like, I'm going to build a world, but they aren't thinking about story. And it's more important. You can go to the same level of detail, but like focus. Okay, is tax policy important in a world where, that's not the fun.
Right.
That gritty realism isn't the fun of this. This is about vampires who hook up with each other. Right. And in a world where vampires hook up with each other,
then if tax comes up, you figure it out. But like in general,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But like the fun of that is what I would imagine is the types of. It doesn't matter. But the point is, I think you can get caught up in the wrong initial framing if you have a static idea about what world building is. I've got to build the map. But do you need a map until you like are orienting people there? You know what I mean? What do you need a map of? For example, I think
I desperately need to go on Fiverr and hire an artist to do a map of my world from the very beginning.
Right. No, but here's the thing. In a story that takes place in one city, you probably just need a map of the city.
Yeah.
Versus a map of the entire continent.
God, if I had,
you need a map of the one country.
If I had money to burn, I would hire artists to do maps of everything all the time, always. Like, wow. I love it. It's so not helpful. I agree with you completely that you don't need it, but it's just one of those
But like
things
I'm saying, if you were to write,
correct. Yeah.
But if you were to write the fantasy novel version of this, and every fantasy novel has a map in the front, I think more fantasy novelists need to be conscious about what is the map of, because you need a map. Because that's the promise you're making of like, this is a fictional world. We need a map of something. I don't need the extended, do you need the map of the continent or the map of the country? I think in a book about the country, let's have a map of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
We are side railing. Let's go back to the book. Here. They give this great example of just like narrative description detail of like, this is just very simple, but it's for a writer starting out being like, there's the version of interior hallway night, Jane unlocks her door, and then the version that has more detail in world and sense of texture, interior hallway night, filthy carpet and discarded pizza boxes, off screen, men shouting, holding her nail under her chin, Jane unlocks 3 deadbolts on her apartment door. The space around your scenes is what's important, right? Like, this tells us so much more about the type of neighborhood she lives in, how rich she is, what type of lifestyle she leads. So many things we learn about the character and the detail of the world compared to in part. Like, there's a version of this where she's rich and she has a maid.
Yeah.
Or a nanny. You know, the filthy carpet, discarded pizza boxes, men shouting, holding mail yourself, 3 deadbolts. You know, this probably isn't a great neighborhood. There's a lot of information we're learning about this person. And that's world building.
Yeah. I love it.
Or I should say it's rendering of the world.
Rendering. That's a good word.
Yeah.
This is basically where we ended for this time, right?
Well, no, there's one more.
Oh, one more tidbit
idea here that I think was really interesting, which was the types of world building. Like, and again, so I agree. I'm probably more like Craig and John than you are in this sense. Clearly, in the book they wrote, but like, I would think of it in terms of what is the story, and is this a story about natives of a world that you have to build? Like natives in Brooklyn or natives in Middle Earth. Everybody was born in Middle Earth and they've lived and died in Middle Earth, or, fantasy vampire land. Or is this a portal story about a character who was from our world but then goes to native vampire world? Or a character who's from native vampire world who comes over to our world? Enchanted's a great example of a character from another world who comes to ours. And they're a fish out of water in our world, versus Wizard of Oz is the inverse, where it's somebody from our world goes to the extraordinary world and they're a fish out of water in that world.
Yeah, like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe vibe.
That's right. That's Enchanted, Wizard of Oz, Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe are all portal stories, but they're different based on which way are you going through the portal. And then this is an interesting one that I love personally. Every single, sorry to bring him up, but every single Neil Gaiman story is a world beneath our noses, right? It's a secondary world within Earth. It's like the world you never notice. It's the world of Neverwhere. It's the world of Coraline. Or what's another example?
Well, I mean, it's also like, Election. Like it's kind of like it's like the political world of high school. That's right. Or like
it's a world that goes by, but you drive by every day, but you don't really know the inner workings of.
Or like
Succession.
Ozark was an example they gave, like where it's like this is a world that's always existed. You kind of knew about it, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a
cool. This is probably my favorite of the 3. If I had to rank them, the world secondary within our own that we don't know much about, whether it's a magical forest in, Texas.
I will say though that it's still kind of a portal story in that you're crossing a barrier into a world you didn't know. But
they are distinct in the fact that it is still in the county. Like, and they still pay taxes here, probably. You know what I mean?
Probably, yeah. It's
like in Ozark, it's still the East Coast, and people who live there are still citizens. They use
Stranger Things though as an example of the world beneath our noses, and I don't know that I would necessarily. No,
that's there's a portal.
You see,
to another
that's what I'm
dimension.
saying. It's a weird. Yeah. It's a kind of a weird. Gray area, but I get it though. The vibes
there's the functionality of a portal, and then there's the nature of the story. Right, the secondary world is how does the world interact with our world, right? Where I think you could say that Stranger Things has way more. It's an interaction of 2 worlds, so it makes a world secondary to ours, and a character uses a portal between. Right. Versus Wizard of Oz was like there's a one-time event where somebody slips in, and then it's about.
Well, then Harry Potter then definitely is a world beneath our noses because it's kind
100% because London is absolutely set piece. Like, the Ministry of Magic is inside the toilet, right? You get there through the toilets in the train station or whatever.
Forgot
And then
about that detail.
platform 9 3/4, it's, you know, the whole idea of, they really play with secondary world. Yeah, that was another example of,
yeah.
I think that's the most interesting. Like, if you were to do a fantasy, I'd gravitate. I mean, I love native, like, oh, this is just the world of Westeros or Middle Earth or whatever. I like those stories too, pure fantasy, but invented world. But World Beneath Our Noses is easier, I think, for movies, because you can start with the familiar and then you twist it.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier for audiences to just accept, oh, okay, I'm watching a movie with these people. Yeah, that's Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, or that's Russia, or oh wait, there's a secret Russia under Russia, or, you know, the shepherds were becoming sheep all along. I don't know. I'm running out of steam here. This was a great. We're gonna take the second half of the book in a few weeks. We'll announce that.
Yeah.
Overall take is, this is a great. This has so many great nuggets that are really useful.
It does. It has a lot of really good nuggets, and like, I like the excerpts that they've chosen to pull, and I think that it's one of those books where if you want to motivate yourself to write as a screenwriter, this is a good one to read. Like, if you kind of like already have a basic understanding of how story works and you like want to get excited again about it, I think that this is a good one to read, because you start reading about it and you're like, oh yeah, it makes so much sense. Like
if you're just interested in screenwriting in any capacity, read this book. It's really great.
Yeah, it's very much about like the emotional side and like the why of storytelling in this medium, which I think
is useful to being someone who can solve problems when you're actually writing. I do think, however, that if you have never written a screenplay before,
don't start here.
Well, you can, but like, you read it again after you've written your first screenplay, because you will get so much more out of it. So many things you'll see described, you'll be like, you won't really understand. You'll see it on the surface level, but you won't really understand what they're talking about until you're on the other side of like actually having written scripts. You'll get so much more out of it after writing a script or reading another screenwriting book. What would be the first screenwriting book you would recommend, Alexie, in 2025?
Save the Cat.
Really? Still?
Yeah.
Even though it's so 1992?
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like, but I think that I've not found...
Controversial.
It is controversial. I don't, like, it's not a good...
But you haven't read a screenplay by Sid Field?
Yes, I have.
You have? Oh.
Yeah, that was...
Why have we never done that one? Why have we never done that?
I think because it's so dry. Like...
It is dry. It is dry.
The driest sandpapery screenwriting book you will ever read. But
we should do it at some point. I don't know.
We should. I think either Sid Field or Save the Cat, just to kind of give you like the bad news first, and then we give you the good news with this book. Like, it's sort of like, here's the bad news. Here's all the structure crap that is like very, very formulaic, and like, you must do this by then, you must do this, this is how it's formatted, this is like what it literally is, and this is what's happening. And then you say, okay, now that you've swallowed that bitter pill of like the idea of like what a script is and what it is not, now we can kind of lighten it up a little bit. What about what would be your first
book?
Agree.
I half agree with you in that book does a great job of being an introduction, like from going from 0 to 60. That is from 0 to 25, I should say. The problem is it has some really bad advice in there. That
it does, yeah.
If you're a first timer, I don't know if I would ever want you to hear that. You know what I mean? Like, he has some weird like tangents, but in retrospect, I totally get what you're saying.
Oh yeah, some of it's really bad though. Like, some of it's like, but I think that I haven't yet read a book that I think does it. Okay, you want to know my real answer? Here's my real answer. I think that you should take writing the feature, and then I think you should read this book.
Yeah, so we have a course, Writing the Feature, with John Warren, NYU professor, and it's great. And that's a lot of people like it.
That's my actual honest answer, is I think that that's a better That's a more modern, but still
But if you
looking at
don't have the
formula.
money,
Yeah.
I do think there are so many great free options,
Yeah.
like of the Script Notes podcast, our videos here, where we talk about it. It's just like if your first foray, like it is a hard thing. What's the first book? What's your first like?
Writing
I
the
think
short.
honestly, YouTube has some great advice too.
Yeah.
Like just in general. But it's just like there's a glut of information. Sometimes it's not internally consistent and it contradicts each other, and people can get confused with decision paralysis. I think
Yeah.
the actual first thing to do is just to write a script.
Yeah.
The first screenwriting script book to read is your own first script that you read, right?
Or just a bunch of other scripts, honestly. Like look up the scripts for your favorite movies, read those,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
go from there. But
Yo, that's a great. I think there's something to be said. You guys, I agree with you. The first screenplay, you should read screenplays as your first book. But that being said, I remember reading the script for Rushmore back in like 2011, and I didn't know shit. And I just read Story by Robert McKee and Save the Cat. Maybe I'm a slow learner, but Reddit wasn't great back then. There weren't as many great screenwriting resources. I was very confused about a lot of things. I grabbed onto the structure thing. Like, structure is so important. I got to have these page marks, but I didn't really understand like how characters worked or like what good storytelling was. I intuitively understood, and I knew when it was bad, but I didn't know how to get there.
yeah.
And I think there is just kind of a sense of like, you just got to write bad stuff to write good stuff. That's just painful that everybody has to get to.
Yeah, you have to write your first script that you then bury.
Yeah,
until you bury
Mine
your
is
first
bad.
script. Yeah, until you bury
Some
your
people
first
have
script,
good first scripts though. Like, some people write what's her name? Ava Victor, who just did that film Sorry Baby that came out this year. It's her
Is that
first ever
really
screen.
Is that
Yeah.
really, or is that just the first one that
My
she claims?
friend knows her. Yeah, and she'd written small things before, but not features. That was her first feature she'd written,
Oh,
and
well,
her
I mean,
first movie that she
yeah.
directed. But she had not done a feature, and that was her first feature, and it was great.
Well, that's impressive.
But she spent 5 years on it, so
yeah.
Well,
cool. Well, we should wrap it up because we've been at it for a while, but we will be back soon with the second half of the book, which gets much more into like plot and the business side of being a screenwriter. So that'll be fun.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a wonderful Wednesday. Or if you're in the future, I hope the world's still there and everything. All right. Adios.